If I could go from being this obese person with arthritis and all of these problems to 10.1% body fat without a lot of exercise necessary.
We spend billions and billions of dollars treating the leading cause of death in the United States: heart disease, cancer, and stroke. What we don't do is spend a lot of money treating the actual causes of death.
I had no idea about the arthritis thing when you were just a teenager.
Oh man, that was bad.
How?
You know, when I was 14, I was playing soccer, and I played for something like 10 years when I was young, and it hurt all the time. And I went to the doctor finally, and he's like, "You have arthritis." I'm like, I was sort of stunned. I didn't even know what to say, and I went home like, "This is a disease for old people." Right. And this is what you think when you're 14, right? And you think, I'm not old, and I don't want to be old. And, you know, it was kind of a weird psychology thing, to be honest. But I had knee braces and all kinds of weird stuff, and it just hurt. It turns out there's a bunch of things that contribute to inflammation like that. But I also hit 300 pounds when I was about 21, 22. I'd had 3 knee surgeries by then. And all kinds of other just strange health problems, nosebleeds, rashes, high blood sugar, just continued weight gain. I'd lose weight, gain weight, allergies, dark circles under my eyes, and stuff. And it turns out I was living in a basement that had toxic mold in it. And toxic mold just poisons you systemically at a cellular level. And one of the things, you get autoimmunity, you get inflammation in your joints. You get like even stretch marks. I have way more stretch marks than I ever should have. Any human should have. And it all came about from the environment around me and the environment inside of me. It's all hackable. If I'd have known what I know now, it would have been like a 1-month fix.
That's crazy. And what I kind of picked up from reading your story was, you know, you just kind of accepted it as normal because it was just a part of your everyday life for a while.
It's kind of like being colorblind. People who are colorblind don't know they're colorblind.
Right.
And you'll ask them and say, "I'm not colorblind." And then you hold up the thing with the red and green and say, "I don't see any difference." And you're like, "Yeah, the rest of us see a difference. Now, do you believe you're colorblind?" And you're like, "Oh." So it wasn't until I was somewhere in college and a doctor made me some orthotics that worked. And I'm like, "Wow, you're supposed to be able to walk across campus without it hurting?" Because it always hurt. It was just a standard thing. So I ended up growing up with, by the time I was 26, they said, "Oh, you've got less testosterone than your mom. You've got high risk of stroke and heart attack." That was when I was about 29. Prediabetes, somewhere in that range. And you look at all the things that take you out when you get old. I'm like, oh, and the cognitive function problems I was having as a result of living in places with toxic mold and eating the wrong fats and just not having the biology that I wanted. I'm like, man, this is a preview of what most people get when they're in their 60s, 70s, 80s. And
Unbelievable.
I don't want to go back to that.
When you said testosterone lower than your mom, like first of all, it stopped me in my tracks. And then you put that your mom's was tested.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That was not.
So it was like not a joke.
I'm not joking. Hers was tested before mine, because even back then, you know, this was 20 something years ago. I knew about anti-aging because I'm interested in the future and like what's going to happen. So I'd read a few things. You know, my parents were getting old, and I said, "You know what, guys, I think you should go see this guy." And I was working on hacking my own health. I didn't recognize that I was as sick as I was, or that I was really as old as I was biologically. So I sent my parents in first, and they saw this guy. And when I went to go see him, he's like, "Well, most of my patients don't look like you. They tend to be old." I'm like, "Well, just do this." And he got all my labs. The first doctor I ever met who used Excel. I said, "Here, I put all your labs on the spreadsheet so we can track them next time." And I'm like, mind blown. Now, it's very commonplace, but I was fortunate to find one of the first guys on earth to do that. And yeah, he said, "Yeah, Dave, your testosterone is lower than your mom's." And I was just like, "Oh my God, that's what's going on." It's one of many things going on, but it was amazing what happened. So if I could go from being this obese person with arthritis and all of these problems to 10.1% body fat without a lot of exercise necessary, with a brain that works like crazy well, and younger at 46 than I was at 36, I feel like everyone else has an unfair advantage over me.
Oh,
and I'm still going to live to 180.
Yeah, I love that too, man. Like just the claim that, you know, that you're really just attaching yourself to, and you say it repeatedly throughout the book. And I'm just like, it's really inspiring, because most people don't have the audacity to say something as strong as that. And the thing is also you're putting things in place to make it more probable, right? And so first, how did you get from there to being even interested in living this long life? How did you go from like, I'm just trying to get well to thinking about longevity?
In order to get well, you sort of have to acknowledge that you're sick. And I had a hard time with that because I'm not sick. Look at me. Like, I made $6 million when I was 26. Like I lost when I was 28. That was a bit of a mistake. But you know,
Another story.
Well, like my career is going pretty well. Like I feel like I'm checking the boxes. And I didn't acknowledge myself. Like I've got the accelerator all the way to the floor all the time, and I'm slowing down. And I can push harder, but there's no room for it to push any harder. And it got a little bit scary. And I said, all right, I got to really start getting on top of my health. It's going to be the most important thing. Every time I get a sinus infection, every time something happens, like I can't show up at work the way I want to show up. And I was at the company that held Google's first servers. When it was 2 guys in a server, they came in and like, hey, can you handle these for us? Like, yeah, we got that. And so this is during the .com times. The Facebook came in and yeah, we got your servers. Like it was kind of a big deal. And I just was like, I can't bring it some days. I don't know what's going on. So I got to manage my health. But the whole idea, I need to recover. I didn't figure that out until much later in the process. What I did do though is I started seeing doctors, and I write kind of the journey in Superhuman. But I started seeing some different doctors saying, "Hey, can you help me with this one thing that I don't like?" And it wasn't that I'm sick. It's not doing what I want. And what I realized, our bodies do what we want. You woke up in the morning, your joints were stiff, or you had a headache, or you were just foggy or cranky or super hungry. Just like look, I just wanted to show up. Like I wanted to be super, super nice today, or I didn't want muffin top, and I got muffin top, and I don't know why, and it pisses me off because it wasn't there yesterday. Right? This happens all the time. We all know what this is like. So this is the mindset that I had. But a friend said, "Hey, Dave, you should hang out at this anti-aging nonprofit group in the Bay Area. It was called Smart Life Forum." I'm like, that sounds dumb. Was actually my response. How arrogant can you be? And like, what kind of a name is that? And of course, the name Life Hacking didn't exist, right? Yeah. And we ended up changing the name of that group years later to Silicon Valley Health Institute. But I can tell you that I went to my first meeting and I was 28, 29 or something. Everyone else in the room was 60, 70, 80, 90. Like, but these are my people. Yeah. And afterwards, I remember the very first meeting, this guy, Mike, he was about 85 years old. And we stayed out till 11:30 chatting just after the meeting. And he was like, I do this. I'm like, oh my God, these guys are taking smart drugs. And Mike, it turns out a couple years later, he started dating a 36-year-old.
Oh my God.
Right. And it was like, he could keep up with her. They were actually in love. And it wasn't sort of a lecherous sort of thing. It was unusual, sure. But the deal is, these are people whose brains work just fine. And people who are saying, I'm like, screw this aging thing. I got this. And these are original Silicon Valley hackers. That group was started by one of the guys who invented Ethernet. And so this has been out there since 1993. And I just said, all right, I got to do this. And I became inspired. I said, if they can do this, and they started in their 60s, I'm starting in like my 20s and 30s. What am I going to be able to do? And then I got to know the experts in the field. And every month we bring like top people in. That's how I learned even how to do my podcast. You interview a whole bunch of people for 10 years once a month on stage about anti-aging stuff. You learn to do the skills that you have. Like, interviewing people is a skill, and you've mastered the skill. Well, I mastered it on stage with people in a room outside Stanford University. And so after being inspired by these people, I said, look, I know that if I can come back from being old when I was young, maybe I can stay younger for longer. And then the 180 number, man, it pisses some people off. But there's a few quotes that didn't even make it into the book. One of them is, before we invented the car, the top minds at the time said, you know what? If you go faster than 16 miles an hour, it'll pull the oxygen out of the car and you'll be unable to breathe. They absolutely believe this. Okay, and of course, the first car comes along and they're like, pretty sure that didn't happen. It might have been 26 miles an hour, by the way. I could be wrong on the number. 16 seems a little low. But anyway, what they figured out is that wasn't true. And the same thing, yeah, I'm going to fly. Like, no, you're not going to fly. But my favorite quote of all is from the head general in the U.S. Army. And he's talking to Congress in 1940-something. And he says, I speak as an expert on munitions and explosives. That atomic bomb thing will never go off. So look, I'm gonna live to 180,
yeah.
right? And maybe I'll die trying, right? But if it's not me, it's someone that I know. Like,
Right.
it might be you. It's someone listening to the show right now. And here's the deal: 120 is in the bag because we've already seen it,
Yep.
right? And these are people who they drink, they smoke, they do whatever. It was accidental, and they probably had good genes, right? There's also a good number of people who are 120 who are actually just taking advantage of their parents' insurance because they're not really 120. They're just really old. So it turns out a substantial number of people who claim to be really old aren't as old as they say they are. But we know we can do it.
Yeah. It's been done.
Right. So now let's see. Given that I've interviewed for Superhuman and for my show, just dozens and dozens of the people cracking the code of aging. The top people on earth, Nobel Prize winners. And you know what? We know more than we ever have. You and me can right now pick up our phone and go to Google and access more knowledge, more research, more information than a king or a president 30 years ago. I mean, it's unfathomable. Do you remember microfiche?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. So I'm dating myself here. I'm 46. I'm not 96, right? When I was starting college, I had one of the first search engine accounts, but no one else in my class knew what the internet was.
Was this like 90?
It was like 94.
94.
94, 95. So to go do research for a paper, you'd go to the library and you get these little transparent plastic card things,
Yeah,
and they're like photocopied into super small, almost like a microscope, and you put on these little readers and you sit there and turn a little knob to read things. And it was so crazy. And then what I do is I'd go home and I would use this website called Alta Vista, one of the first search engines. And I was making these papers, and my professor's like, "Oh my God, this is the best research ever. Like, I love this paper." And I'm sort of laughing, going, like, it's because I can search better than you.
Man.
And I look at where we are now. I couldn't write Superhuman. It would have taken me 10 years to write this book 10 years ago.
Yeah,
but now
at
the
least.
the information's all there. Yeah. So the speed of progress is happening. And given that I know the people doing the work who've been at it for decades, I'll be damned if we can't do 50% better over the next 100 years of my life. Like, look at where we were 100 years ago. We were fighting wars with horses in 1919. Okay? It's a whole different world. If we don't do 180, I'm stupid. And if a truck hits me tomorrow, I'm stupid too. Just to be clear.
Man, this is so awesome, man. If you're thinking about, even in the book, you detail some of the stories of just historically we've been chasing immortality.
Yeah.
Our ancestors were kind of looking for this virtual fountain of youth, and they found little pieces here and there.
Yeah.
And it's again, like where we're at now with technology, with our access to information, it is really inspiring. And one of those things that I admire about you was you chased after it early, because you found this information out.
Dude, being old sucks if you do it the wrong way. And I just did it the wrong way when I was young. Yeah. Like, I chased after it because it was a painful, crappy thing to wake up every day and be like, my body hurts and I can't think. Like, to be really clear, I was a little selfish about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you found yourself in Nepal, and knees hurting. You were traversing, I think you were coming down altitude first.
From the Annapurna circuit in one day to make a flight.
And when was this? How old were you around
Let's see. This would have been 2004. Okay. So whatever, 30-ish, 32 maybe. So I descended 7,500 vertical feet in one day. And that's more than a mile. And it's just basically coming on passes. I was using trekking poles, but by the end of the day, I was like, my knees really hurt. And the next day I woke up, I couldn't walk across the street to get breakfast.
With the poles?
With the poles. I mean, I was truly disabled. And I was like, man, I got 1 or 2 days to resupply. And then I'm getting on a bus for 5 days to go from Kathmandu to Lhasa. And then I'm going to somehow make my way across to the other side of Tibet, and I'm going to walk around this mountain. There's the holiest mountain in the world. And I didn't have it planned very well. It was sort of just let things happen the way they're going to. But I was thinking, I don't think I could walk 100 yards. So I said, let's see how fast I could recover while I'm at super high altitude driving over passes in the Himalayas. It was a challenge.
So I think you already had some education about collagen, and so you were looking for a little dose.
Well, I knew that I knew about collagen, and I knew that you really can't buy collagen, and so I said, all right, what can I do? I went to this little restaurant. I say little restaurant. There's a town. It's got 4 buildings, and you all sleep in this big shared room. The beds are like 5 feet long. I'm 6'4", so I'm hanging off the end of the bed, and there's one restaurant. And I go in there, and the menu's in Chinese. And so I asked the Chinese guy who was on the bus with me, and he said, read the menu. And he said, pig's ears. And I'm like, oh, man, that's the only thing on here that's full of collagen. I was hoping there'd be like pig's feet, which are equally gross, actually. But you need something that's all gristly and nasty. And so I've never eaten pig's ears. And they're ice cold. It just steamed pig's ears, just a huge bowl. It had to be like a dozen or so pig's ears. I'm like, this is nasty. Like chicken's feet would have been better. So I what'd I do? I ordered soup, and I would like dip the thing in the soup. And then I
try to warm it up a
yeah, and then just rubbery nastiness. But I was like, I need building blocks. My body's not healing because I've got nothing to make it out of. And I was traveling with handfuls of supplements. These weren't the collagen sort of things. The next day, I could walk again. I mean, it was transformative, and I started healing, and I ended up getting to the point where I was fully healed, and I could walk 26 miles at up to 18,000 feet elevation around the mountain 10 days later. But it was that thing. I came back on that mountain is when I had yak butter tea that turned my brain back on, and it was collagen that turned my knees back on. And I came back and said, I got to do this. And it's kind of funny. Bulletproof put collagen on the map. Like the reason it's a supplement that's cool and for high performers instead of, your mom's Jell-O, which was the only place you'd ever get collagen before. It's because of that trip.
Wow. Awesome, man. So awesome. So, and just shout out first of all, you couldn't even walk with the walking sticks. Shout out to people who just walk down the street with walking sticks.
Oh yeah. I love that.
I'm just like, I thought it was kind of weird, like it's LA 90 degrees and they're just out there trekking down the sidewalk, but it's a thing.
Have you ever used them?
I have not, no.
All right, there's an actual skill. I used to do a lot of backpacking before I had kids. When you have kids, you stop doing like yoga and backpacking and stuff like that because they tend to take a lot of time. So you might do a little bit, but not like you did. So you're going to do long distance, like John Muir Trail or something. Almost everyone uses them now. And when you learn to walk like a four-legged creature, it changes your brain. You cross pattern, but you can carry so much more, and you get an upper body workout. So you see all these hikers, if they've hiked 500 miles, what they have is these super massive legs and super skinny arms. But if you use trekking poles, you actually maintain the muscle mass, and you get all that lymphatic movement. So I'd say if you're going to walk 10 miles and you learn how to use the poles, you feel better when you're done. And also, let's look at knee replacement and hip replacement surgery. It's happening all over the place. Maybe not wearing them out is a good idea. So I think spreading the load, especially if you've got a backpack on, there's a really good argument for trekking poles.
Awesome. So one of the things that jumped into my mind when you were kind of laying out this really strong argument of how long we can live and how long a lot more people are going to live, I immediately thought about, what about overpopulation?
It's funny. A lot of people don't know my first book was about fertility. I spent 5 years writing it. My wife was infertile, and we restored her fertility using food and vitamins and testing and things without IVF or anything like that. We had one kid at 39, one at 42, and she's a Karolinska-trained physician. So I know a thing or two about fertility, and I'll just tell you straight up, we don't have a population problem. We have one right now. We won't have one in 50 years from now because the fertility rate is declining because our health is going down so fast as a species. And that sounds really scary, but the solution to that problem is live a long time and wait, because people literally who want to reproduce can't reproduce. And on top of that, if you look at the number of people who are choosing to have kids in every developed nation right now, even when they can have kids, it's going down dramatically. And it's happened in Japan, it's happened in China, it's certainly happening in the US. So we have all these aging populations. And one dark picture of the future is you have a bunch of aging, infirm populations with no young people to take care of them. That kind of sounds crappy. Another possible future is that you have these aging populations of people who are now the village elders and have lots of time, energy, and desire to give back to their communities and to help the people who don't know all the stuff that you learn by taking arrows in your back for 8 decades. Right. The things you might have learned about how to have a good marriage because you only failed at them 3 or 4 times over the course of your life, and now you're probably kind of a pro and you can tell the 25-year-old getting married for the first time what not to do. This is called wisdom.
Right.
And when we have an older population whose brains work and bodies work the way they're supposed to, we will have an epidemic of wisdom.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to that. The other thing is, if you really realize at your core, you know what, I might be around 100 years from now. I might be around 200 years from now. Maybe I shouldn't poop in my own sandbox. right? You're going to have to take care of the world you live in better. You're going to have to take a long-term view because guess what? You're a long-term animal now, right? So you stop using single use when you can, or you recycle when you do, and you make better decisions, right? And I believe that if we think, look, life is short, mean, brutal, then you spend 20 years hooked up to tubes and monitors while the medical industrial system drains your bank account. If that's your picture of the world, you're going to act like an asshole, right? And if your picture of the world is that I'm going to be old and wise and fully able to move under my own power, and I'm going to know so much cool stuff, and I'm going to be able to help so many people, and it's going to be awesome, and I'm going to meet my great grandkids and actually be friends with them, you're going to behave differently. And it's the change in behavior that matters. And to change your behavior, you have to change how you see the future.
Wow, facts. Absolutely. Well, I want to get into science now.
All right.
And you really, again, lay out a really great case that the foundation for longevity begins with our mitochondria.
Yeah, it turns out in Superhuman, I go really deep, but I wrote a whole book about mitochondria that it hit the New York Times Science bestseller list, which is, for me as an author, I didn't think I'd ever do that. It was sandwiched between Homo Deus and Sapiens. So the little headstrong was in there. I was like, okay, that's the coolest thing ever. And that was my big focus on mitochondria in the brain. So in Superhuman, it's not just mitochondria. They're certainly a part of it. These mitochondria, for people who haven't heard of that, they're these power plants in the cells. But really, that's a simplification. What they're actually doing is they're sensing the environment around you and deciding what to do on a second-by-second basis. And sometimes they make power, but other times they make hormones. Other times they make chemicals that you need. And they're kind of the puppet masters inside your body. But they're inside your cells. They're ancient bacteria that became a part of us. And the other things inside the cells are equally important. So aging starts at the cell. And you have these things called lysosomes inside cells. And all these different things that you might remember the names of because you colored them in 7th grade biology, and no one ever told you why they mattered. Right. And in fact, they generally didn't matter back then because we didn't understand. Yeah. Well, now we know the 4 things that are going to kill you, and we know pretty much 7 of the things that are likely to make you age. And the trick here that's revolutionary in the idea behind Superhuman is that you can't say, oh, you know what? My car's going to last forever. I'm just going to make sure I change the tires all the time. Because you might have to do some other stuff, right? You have to change all of the maintenance things that you're doing. So you change the oil, you do your timing belts when it's time, you change the tires, and you do the things you do to continuously maintain and repair the system. Our bodies are the same way, and we just know more than we ever did. That makes it easier to do. It also means that if you know that your tires are going to wear out, maybe you ought to not drive over all the potholes when you have a chance, right? So we can do both. And a lot of the arguments in Superhuman are, here's the things you're doing that increase the speed of your aging that don't give you any benefit, right? So maybe we could just stop doing those, because if you're going to go eat something that tasted good and one thing that tastes good messes up your cells and the other one doesn't, better choice. I describe aging as death by 1,000 cuts. It's not just one thing. So just take fewer cuts, make them less deep. You're still going to take hits. That's the nature of life, right? Because sometimes it's fun, right? Right? There's nothing wrong with having fun. I'm not talking about living in a cave or a bubble. I'm just saying when you can make a choice that both choices are good, both of them are pleasurable, do the one that gives you less damage and then consciously repair the damage.
Right. So one of the big tenets is, which is so obvious, is for longevity, don't die. Right. So you talk about
that one works pretty well.
And specifically, you outline 4 killers.
Yeah.
Right. There's the 4 main killers, the top things right now that are taking us out. And you also relate with each of these 4 things, which was really beautiful to see how inflammation is tied into each of these 4 killers. So let's talk about the 4 killers and how inflammation relates to each one.
It seems kind of ironic. Like, okay, you want to live forever, don't die. Done. That was the whole book. But then you say, all right, let's assume that you and me are average. And I got to tell you, we're not average. Like we're here in LA. We're doing a podcast. We can choose our food more so than the average human being. And all of the numbers we look at, they're usually just all over the place. So the numbers I'm going to talk about are for developed nations, but this includes the people who live on Pop-Tarts and ramen and margarine. So we're not average.
Our former diet.
There you go. Now, 4 things that are going to kill almost everyone listening to this, at least 80% of them, one or the other. One of them is cancer. And the rate of cancer is up dramatically. Something like 40% of people get it in their lifetime. The good news is that you die half as half as often from cancer as we used to. We actually can cure cancer better than we could, although we're still far from curing it. And a lot of times the cure is pretty brutal, to be honest. But our survival rates are up because our early detection rates are better. But maybe not getting cancer is the right strategy here. That's the one that I'm pursuing. And also detecting early if you get it, because it's relatively easy to get rid of cancer. In fact, you and me, we have cancer right now, unquestionably. There are precancerous cells circulating in our bodies, and our natural killer cells are going through and knocking those things out. Like, it's just how the body works. So there's nothing to worry about there. But if you were to do a few things in your lifestyle, or maybe some of the more extreme things in here around cancer, you're saying, all right, I just reduced my chances. The next one that's likely to take you out is cardiovascular disease. In fact, it may be more likely than cancer in terms of death. And cardiovascular disease is stroke and heart attack, and it's rampant. It turns out we know more about that than ever before. And one of the things I call out here is that we like to say, oh, you ate some cholesterol, you're bad, there was an egg yolk. Look, 2 studies now have looked at the very specific type of fat that's building up in your arteries. Newsflash, they didn't come from your food. They came from the bacteria in your gut. They are fats made by bacteria. All of this vegan nonsense about, oh, you can't eat fat, animal products cause cardiovascular disease, BS. Now, eating an animal that ate antibiotics and corn and soy that then modified your gut bacteria to make them turn against you so that they made the things that are okay. Now we're talking. So in terms of vegan nonsense, don't eat industrial animals fed antibiotics ever. They will shorten your life, and it's stupid, and it's bad for the animals, it's bad for the planet, and it's evil. I don't do that. I actually live on a farm, and I raise my own animals. But you can't do that. Go to the farmer's market, or at least get grass-fed or wild-caught beef. And if you go to a restaurant and they only have industrial meat, it's real easy. Order the vegetarian meal, but skip the tofu. That stuff is gross. All right. That was my rant about cardiovascular disease. Butter is not bad for you. All right. Next up, we have type 2 diabetes, rampant. And type 2 diabetes is really evil because it increases your risk of dying from cancer and heart disease dramatically. And most people start out with that, and then they get one of the other ones. And by the way, the other killer is Alzheimer's disease, about 10% of people. And diabetes increases your risk dramatically of all of those. So let's focus on diabetes. What is diabetes really? It's your body's inability to turn food and air into energy, into electrons. The same electrons that power your iPhone power you. What part of the cell does that? Might it be the mitochondria? Yes. So then how do we hack the mitochondria? Well, fortunately, that's an area of pretty strong expertise for me. It turns out every cell in your body and subcellular components like mitochondria, they have membranes. Now, you and me would think of a membrane as being, like a baggie, like a plastic layer. That's not really what they are. I was thinking, okay, maybe it's more like a condom. A little bit stretchy, maybe some things can get through there. They're not like that either. What they are is more like when you have a sheen of oil on the top of water. It's a thin layer of tiny droplets of fat that repel water on both sides. So they kind of string together. Well, what fat might be important? And a big part of at least the diabetes angle in Superhuman, and Superhuman, by the way, is not a diet book. I mean, you've read it. There's some stuff about food, but this is about living to 180 and all the stuff you do. But from a nutritional perspective, if you were to eat the types of fat that your body needs to make healthy membranes, one of the biggest things that helps with highly functioning mitochondria, which then prevents diabetes, is have membranes that allow sugar and fat in and have all the components needed to make energy inside the cell. And that means 45% of the fat in your cell membranes is saturated fat. And this is why you can laugh when people say don't eat saturated fat. However, it's very interesting to note that you could say, oh, this is permission to eat a high-fat diet. Except it's not, because different fats do different things. And who would have thought? And you could say, well, margarine and corn oil, those are probably different than coconut oil. There must be some differences. It turns out the type of fat really matters. So you're not going to never eat any, quote, bad fats, but I'm going to tell you right now, if you have a choice between smoking a cigarette and eating a plate of French fries, smoke the cigarette. And the data is very clear on that. Nicotine actually has some anti-aging effects. Smoking is terrible for you, though. You shouldn't do it. But your inflammation is going to last for about 8 hours. The inflammation from the French fries is good for 24 hours. And that nasty fat is going to get taken up in your cell membranes. And when it gets taken up, it's going to make free radicals. So seriously, I don't care if it's calamari or Brussels sprouts. If it's deep fried, especially at a restaurant where they've been using that oil for God knows how long, just don't do it. You don't eat that anymore. It's not food. And just like you shouldn't smoke if you want to live a long time. So you got to pay attention to that. And the other thing is, people say, oh, then you should eat a high protein diet. Look, what kind of protein? You know my favorite plant-based protein? It's ricin, the nerve gas that they use in the subway Tokyo Attack. It comes from beans. Okay, so there you go, plant-based people. Plant-based protein will kill you. Oh, well, okay, then what about animal-based protein? Oh, spider venom. That stuff is kind of probably bad to eat too. So animal-based protein will kill you. Or, dare I say, different proteins from different sources do different things. And you cannot be simplistic like a child and say, I'm going to eat protein from animals or plants, because it doesn't matter unless you know what protein it is and what it does. The same is true for fat, and the same is true for carbs. Like I just made a new prebiotic that is 100% carbs, that doesn't raise your blood sugar at all, feeds your gut bacteria, but it's a carb. It's a little different from corn syrup, right? How do we sort this out? We have to stop thinking about those simplistic categories because they're stupid. And that's in Superhuman. I'm like, look, these are the fats to prioritize. These are the ones to deprioritize. And here's why.
Yeah. You know, and I know you've probably dealt with this too, but, you know, in dealing with the publisher, a lot of the powers that be really don't think people can get this stuff. You know, we really want to simplify things. Yeah. And they've said the words, you know, dumb it down. I don't agree at all. I think that people are smart enough, and I think that we are well equipped to understand the complexity. This is bigger than that.
There's a book by my friend Ryan Holiday, who's a great author. I don't know if you've ever had him on. And it's called Perennial Seller. And it's a book about the mindset that goes into writing a great book. And you understand it because you don't want to dumb it down. And you have a moral obligation to explain it in a way that's consumable. But you can disrespect people by just, oh, I'm going to make it so dumb. Just do this. But look, the people who listen to your show, the people who read Superhuman, people who read your writing, they want to know that there's a reason to do what they do, and they want to know what the reason is. So I look at it, I believe the same way you do. Say, look, here's what to do. And if that's all you want, go to the next chapter. But if you want to know why and how, and you want to learn how to think so you can take care of yourself forever, it's in there. And that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
I was also inspired by my uncle, who was a physician. And he said that, I remember I was about 16 and I decided I was going to pursue this kind of career. And he said, no, absolutely not. Nobody in this family goes to these alternative type doctors, and nobody certainly becomes one of these alternative doctors. And he said, it would be better if I became a communist spy.
Wow.
And he was absolutely irate. I remember him screaming and yelling. I thought I was going to witness my first stroke right then and there. But anyway, he left, and my dad, who was a pretty serious guy, took me aside. He said, son, I don't know about this alternative medicine business, he says, but anything that makes him that angry and mad, well, it can't be bad, so you stick to your guns. Oh. And he encouraged me, and and I went to chiropractic college in Oregon, and then osteopathic college in Australia, and I got a chance to do some work with a guy named Alec Burton, who had decades of experience using medically supervised water-only fasting and helping people get well. And it blew my mind because I watched these people coming in with conditions that I was trained, nothing you can do except give them drugs, they'll be sick forever, that's just how it is, high blood pressure, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, lymphoma, and they got well. And oh man, if this one gets well, I'll really be convinced. I said it like 50 times to myself. And so as I started seeing people get well, I realized that things were a little different than I had been trained and that I had believed. And that the difference seemed to be the people willing to do really dangerous and radical things like, eat well and exercise and go to bed on time and use fasting were actually able to heal themselves from these conditions. They got off their blood pressure meds, they got off their diabetes meds, their blood sugar and blood pressure normalized. I remember calling my uncle and saying, Uncle, I'm seeing these patients with blood pressure consistently getting well. He says, no, they're not. I said, I'm taking their blood pressures. They're getting well. He says, you don't know how to take blood pressures. I said, no, I know how to take blood pressures. And so when I came back to the United States after training in Australia, my wife, Dr. Morano, and I decided we were going to do this. And so we opened up True North Health Center. This was 1986. And since then, we've had over 20,000 people undergo fasting here. We've had a chance to see a wide variety of conditions get well, and we're publishing those results in peer-reviewed journals. So we're able to demonstrate that fasting can be done safely, it can be efficacious, as long as a reasonable protocol is followed and you do it with the appropriate patients.
That's powerful. Your family sounds like it would be a wonderful sitcom, by the way. But you stated something in your work. You stated that, and this can seem a little unusual, you stated that essentially when you go to see a conventional physician, they often don't expect you to get better. And that's kind of what you were alluding to.
Well, not only that, they guarantee you, if you go into a conventional doctor, say with high blood pressure, they will say, number one, you will need to take these medications. It might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different medications, depending on how many drugs it takes to bring your pressure down. And they will guarantee you, if you do exactly what you're told, you'll never get well. They'll tell you, you'll be on these drugs, not for a week, not for a month, but for the rest of your life. Because they know these drugs will not get you healthy, but they will try to bring your pressure down and reduce your risk of stroke. It never even dawns on them about getting well. It's not part of the paradigm. At the True North Health Center, we are a residency training site. And so, for example, students will come in as part of their training. They spend a month rotation at the clinic. And the most common comment from the medical interns is, wow, I've never seen somebody with blood pressure get well before. Or I've never seen somebody with diabetes get well before. This is the first, because it's not part of the paradigm. The paradigm is you manage these symptoms with drugs, you pay the price, the chronic cough, fatigue, the impotence, the premature death, and that's just accepted as a consequence because nobody gets well. This is an alternative approach. This is considered very radical, and radical comes from the word radicus, or root or cause, because you're dealing with the root or cause, the reason why people got high blood pressure. And it's largely because of what people put in their mouth. So when you change the cause, you get rid of the problem. Now, granted, there's a downside. You have to keep eating a healthy diet, and you have to keep exercising, you have to keep getting enough sleep, you have to avoid the things that cause the problem. But that's more than what most people want to take on. Most people want to keep doing the things that cause their problem, but take a pill, potion, or powder, and then pretend like that's going to get them healthier.
Right. These are all things that you just listed. These are things that our genes expect us to do. You know, our DNA expects us to provide these environmental inputs. And what you're just sharing is that a lot of these drugs, they're not really treating the underlying condition. They're treating the consequences of not doing those things. Is that right?
Right. It's like we spend billions and billions of dollars treating the leading causes of death in the United States: heart disease, cancer, and stroke. What we don't do is spend a lot of money treating the actual causes of death, the reason people get heart disease, cancer, and stroke. We give them a greasy, fatty, processed food diet. They get obese. They develop metabolic syndrome. Then they are at increased risk of dying from heart disease, cancer, stroke, and even infectious diseases like COVID-19. If you look today, like who's vulnerable to dying from infectious diseases, one of the major risk factors is metabolic syndrome, increased blood pressure, blood sugar levels, blood lipid levels, etc. So the idea being that the same diet that makes you vulnerable to dying from heart disease is the same diet that makes you vulnerable from dying from some forms of cancer and autoimmune diseases and even infectious diseases.
It's so true.
So unless we're prepared to make those dietary and lifestyle changes, get rid of the drinking of the alcohol, the use of the tobacco, and the use of the chemicals that are added to food that make us fat, sick, and miserable, the salt, the sugar, the oil, then we're not going to be able to get rid of the actual causes of disease, and we'll be stuck treating the leading causes of death.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. From my knowledge, I'm the first person that I'm aware of to really just go and actually stay on top of the CDC site, because it's right there on the site itself. The most updated data, and this is just from a couple weeks ago, found that 94% of the folks who lost their lives in association with COVID-19 had an average of 3.8, and we'll put the link for everybody in the show notes, 3.8 pre-existing chronic diseases and or comorbidities. It's insane. It's just, how are we even walking around so sick in the first place? Wow.
Yeah, it's very frustrating because the paradigm is off, and so that means behavioral changes are difficult to induce. You know, people aren't thinking about getting well, they're thinking about how do you get your symptoms to go away. And even with weight loss, you know, most programs fail miserably at reducing all-cause mortality. Even procedures like surgical procedures, gastric bypass, where they may be able to average a 50-pound weight reduction. It still doesn't reduce all-cause mortality substantially, because you're still not dealing with the reason why people are overweight and developing the diseases of dietary excess. They used to call those the diseases of kings, because it was only the wealthy elite kings that could develop the cardiac artery disease and the diabetes or the gout. These were conditions that were rare. Now they're ubiquitous, because even people of limited means in modern society are eating highly processed foods that in the past would have only been available to the wealthy elite.
Yeah, we're all royalty now, in a sense, and maybe the joker, maybe the jester. So I want to talk to you. Really, this is why I'm so excited, and I mentioned this, in my clinical practice, as well as just from some of the great teachers that I've had the opportunity to work with over the years, utilizing this tool of fasting. And we've done different episodes talking with some of the experts, especially in the vein of intermittent fasting. But today I want to talk about and provide this tool, because this could be transformative, even life-saving for folks who really do need it. And you're somebody who is really arguably the top person in the world when we're talking about medically supervised water fasting. So can you talk about exactly what does that mean? What does that constitute, and why it's so effective?
So, definition of fasting is the complete abstinence of all substances except pure water in an environment of complete rest. And, this resting business, as we can discuss, is really important, because one of the goals of fasting is to give the body a chance to mobilize and eliminate those accumulated intermediary products that have built up inside the cells and inside the body that are thought to contribute to compromising health. And so there's actually two kinds of fasting that people do that are common right now. One is intermittent fasting, which you mentioned, which is essentially, for example, limiting the feeding window. In other words, what we do at our clinic and with our patients is we feed them in an 8-hour feeding window when they're eating. And they have a 16-hour period of fasting. So that means they're not eating 3 or 4 hours before they go to bed. We might delay breakfast a little bit from what's traditional. And so that means they eat within that 8 hours. Or if you have people that perhaps need a higher caloric intake, maybe they're feeding in a 12-hour window. But the idea is even that 12 to 16 hours of fasting, just that brief amount of time is cumulatively thought to induce changes in the body that are associated with healing, increasing autophagy, reducing insulin resistance, etc. So that little bit of fasting every day that almost everybody can do safely, because it doesn't require withdrawal medications, it doesn't require radical supervision, may be a good long-term benefit. And there's lots of research by Walter Longo and others, both in animal studies and now in human studies, showing that there's some benefit to limiting the feeding window and using intermittent fasting. He also recommends periods of time during the month where maybe you would limit your calorie intake to 750 or 800 calories, maybe using whether it's his products or whether it's food restriction. But the idea is to facilitate weight loss and reverse some of those dietary excess issues. What we do that's unique is long-term water-only fasting, actual fasting, not fasting mimicking programs, but actual fasting. And those periods of time will range anywhere from 5 to 40 days. So when they're undergoing fasting at the True North Health Center, first of all, let's be clear, it's people that have been medically screened. We've reviewed their medical history, done a physical exam, and established baseline laboratory data, so we know they're good candidates for fasting. And then they're in an inpatient setting, in our case, the True North Health Center, where they're being seen twice a day by staff doctors, and they're being evaluated, both blood, urine, and physical examination finding by doctors experienced in long-term fasting. And they're on water only, literally distilled water only, for anywhere from 5 to up to 40 consecutive days. And during that time, some really profound changes occur in the body. And as a 501c3 nonprofit research-based organization, we're in a position to actually research, document, and publish in peer-reviewed journals the results of what we're seeing, which really, as you mentioned, is rather spectacular. We mentioned blood pressure. We did a study on high blood pressure where we took 174 consecutive patients with high blood pressure. And of those 174 patients, 174 people were able to lower their pressure enough to eliminate the need for medication. And for those that are willing to stick to a health-promoting diet, they can sustain those results indefinitely. We have the largest effects that have ever been shown in treating high blood pressure, with an average effect size of 60 points in stage 3 hypertension, people with systolic blood pressures that start at 180 or higher. So these people are able to normalize their blood pressure, and if they adopt a whole plant food SOS-free diet, they can sustain those blood pressures, eliminate the drugs that cause the chronic cough, fatigue, impotence, and premature death, and overcome that problem, a problem that usually is considered to be irreversible, but manageable with drugs.
That's incredible. I really hope that everybody's ears are perking up because, again, you just mentioned high blood pressure, hypertension. It's one of those things just consider like you got it. It's in your genes.
We say the same thing with type 2 diabetes, another condition of dietary excess, where they're making enough insulin, but the insulin's not working because of insulin resistance, to where they're having to use medications to try to force the glucose into the cells. Well, you know, when glucose can't get from the bloodstream into the cells where it's needed to be burned as fuel, blood sugar levels go up. That's what diabetes mellitus is inability of insulin to do its job. Well, fasting reduces insulin resistance. And so it allows most type 2 diabetics to achieve normal blood sugar levels without the need for the insulin or the metformin or the other medications. And that's huge. And we'll see hemoglobin A1Cs where they're 14, 16, and with diet and lifestyle change and fasting end up 5 and sustainable. Again, they got to do the diet, the sleep, the exercise, because you have to maintain healthful living in order to maintain the problem. So fasting's not like a magic cure. It's just a way to create an environment to give the body a chance to do what it does best, and that's heal itself if you get out of the way.
So what is the underlying mechanism that enables fasting to be so effective? Is it because food requires so much energy? Does that play a part?
Well, actually, we know there's a number of mechanisms by which fasting works, and one of them certainly is weight loss. I mean, you know, anything you do that facilitates healthful weight loss may be potentially beneficial, and obviously nothing works better than fasting. I mean, if you fast, you lose an average of a pound a day. So people do on fast lose a lot of weight. That's certainly at least part of the beneficial effect. There's also a natriuretic effect that occurs where the body selectively eliminates sodium and flushes it out, and most people are eating these high salt diets that allow them to hold lots of extra fluid in order to protect yourself from that toxic effect of excess sodium. And so that excess fluid volume increases your blood pressure. And so when you natriuresis or diurese, what happens is the body gets rid of the excess fluid, the blood volume goes down, the blood pressure starts to drop, the non-healing wounds start to heal, the congestive heart failure starts to reverse. And we also see primary detoxification in fasting. That was kind of the traditional justification for fasting. This idea that the body had toxins in it. And in fact, we know now if you take a fat biopsy of just about anybody in society, you'll find hundreds of different chemicals. Dioxin, PCB, pesticide residues, heavy metals, all kinds of exogenous toxins. There's also endogenous materials, not necessarily toxins, but things like cholesterol and lipofusion and creoid and all kinds of things that are maybe normal products, but when they're in abnormal quantity, they may interfere with cellular function. And the body in fasting rapidly mobilizes and eliminates these toxins. In fact, some people argue does it so rapidly it might be dangerous unless you take their proprietary products. Then, of course, I guess it's perfectly safe. There's also the idea that fasting, much like exercise, induces enzymatic changes. You know, when a competitive athlete works out every day, they get better and better at mobilizing glycogen in their glycogen stores and storing more glycogen. And so that glycogenolysis process is driven by enzymes. And so when you exercise and you force glycogenolysis, you get better at it. You canalize these pathways. Well, fasting does the same thing. When you go on a fast, you canalize glycogen mobilization, and after 48 hours, you've used up your glycogen. Then you canalize lipolysis, fat mobilizing enzyme pathways, and gluconeogenesis, protein mobilizing pathways. And when you induce these pathways, it turns out that persists. So it's not just while you're fasting that you detoxify and mobilize macronutrients more efficiently, but even after fasting, those enzyme pathways persist, much like exercise and athletics, those enzyme systems persist. And so you're inducing macronutrient mobilizing enzyme pathways, which are also mobilizing detoxifying pathways. And so that process of detoxifying gets more and more efficient, maybe a little bit with intermittent fasting and certainly a whole lot with long-term fasting. And so the idea is that the body not just gets rid of the fat, but also a lot of the materials that are stored in that fat, lowering the total body load. We also see problems with gut leakage in people where the intestinal mucosa, fine filter membranes, can become inflamed when exposed to free radicals and leak materials that in genetically vulnerable people stimulates the immune system to attack those particles, but also their own tissues. I mean, that's what autoimmune disease is, where your immune system is attacking your own body. So ulcerative colitis, where your immune system is actually responsible for the inflammation in your colon. And one of the theories is that gut leakage, the constant exposure to these aberrant proteins or bacteria, etc., can lead to this autoimmune response. Well, fasting allows the inflammatory process to profoundly reduce. We know that because if you look at acute phase reactive proteins or other measures of inflammation in the body, it progressively comes down in fasting. We're showing that in the research that we're doing right now. And we see it clinically because these issues heal up. The joint pain goes down. You're getting them off the prednisone, off the methotrexate, out of pain. And then if you feed a whole plant food SOS-free diet, you can actually sustain those results. And so we know that this process of healing the gut leakage appears in fasting. Some of the metabolic products that show up that are aberrant in the urine go away after fasting, which is a sign that micro mesh membrane in the intestinal mucosa is actually healing. And of course, you got to get rid of the free radicals that cause it to get. That's why you can't drink, because drinking alcohol bathes the body in free radicals. That's why you get cirrhosis of the liver, which is essentially scar tissue, including from wine, even if it's organic. Alcohol itself is a nasty, toxic substance that, from our viewpoint, needs to be eliminated. Same thing with heated fats, particularly heated animal fats at high temperature. Lots of free radicals. The best example is actually smoking. You know, think about people that smoke. They get smoker's face. They get that premature aging. Wrinkles are cross-linked collagen tissues that come from the free radicals from bathing the body with smoking. So you first get rid of the free radicals, but then you've got to heal up the gut. And one way to heal up the gut is to do, well, nothing. Fasting. It does it on its own. It does it automatically, and it does it more efficiently, we found, than it does with the pills, potions, and powders and all this stuff that everybody's trying to sell everybody. This is a very ancient practice that gives the body a chance to very rapidly both detoxify, normalize some of these factors. There's even, think about psychospiritual issues. Almost every religion, the Jews, the Jains, the Hindus, the Muslims, the Christians, everybody, they might kill each other in the street over disagreements, but they have one thing they all agree on, and that's that fasting is a very important process, both for mental and psychological and spiritual purposes. Fasting changes the way people feel about themselves and the world around them. It happens automatically. You can't help it. And so that may be why all these major religions have respect for fasting. And all we've done is take this ancient practice and begin to investigate it scientifically to understand how it is it has such a profound effect on people. Fasting stimulates the immune systems, a process called autophagy. And in fact, in 2016, the Nobel Prize for Medicine was given to a gentleman from Japan that did some fabulous research showing how autophagy is how the body kills cancer cells and reverses these toxicity issues. And fasting accentuates this process of autophagy. And I think one of the biggest things with fasting that we've identified is changes in taste adaptation. We did a study where we detected minimum threshold to salt, to sugar, and we showed that after fasting, the actual taste perceptions change in people to where the foods they used to crave, aren't even that appealing anymore. It's too salty, it's too sweet. They don't need that artificial stimulation that comes from the chemicals that we're adding to food. And the hedonic response, the liking of various types of food changes with fasting. So now people will like the taste of fresh fruit and vegetables that maybe they didn't like before, but now post-fasting they find actually they're very enjoyable. The same process happens over time with careful feeding. If you eat well for a month, you neuroadapt to a low-salt diet. But to get people to eat well for a month is hard when the food is tasteless, disgusting, swill to them because they're addicted to the pleasure trap. So helping escape the pleasure trap may be one of the most powerful tools of fasting because it gives the body a chance to, it's like taking a computer that's got a corrupted hard drive and you reboot it, and now all of a sudden, you don't know why, but it works well. It's working again. And we find the same thing is true with fasting, and we're trying to figure out the why with the research we're doing at True North Health.
I love this. I haven't shared this with you, but what you're describing is exactly what happened to me. I didn't eat a salad in my entire life until I was 25 years old. This is the first time I ate a salad. I have no idea how I made it that far, but already I'd made some changes. I was eating less processed food, all this kind of stuff, but just my ability, my palate. I remember a couple months prior, my mother-in-law, who's just one of my greatest teachers, She made this wonderful salad, and she made this dressing from scratch. It's called, we call it Asante Sana dressing, which means thank you in Swahili. But it was like made from almond butter. It's just wonderful. And I took a bite and I immediately went to the trash can because I was like heaving, you know? And I implemented a fast. It was a couple of weeks. And I went to get a salad. It was the first meal after, which we're going to talk about progressing back to eating food again.
Yeah, very important.
And I went and I sat down at Whole Foods and had a salad by myself off in a corner somewhere. And I took the first bite. And I was scared. I was just like, definitely going to throw up. And I took a bite and my brain was like, this is so good. And I was still scared. I took the next bite. I was like, nah, it's just a fluke. I took the next bite. It's like, this is so good. I ate that salad and I walked out of there and somebody's walking by and I was just like, I just ate a salad. And they looked at me like I was from another planet, like, okay, you know? So literally, and I just today I was looking at some of this data from University of Buffalo, and they're trying to kind of pinpoint what's making this palate change take place. And it's apparently our bodies are so amazing, but one of those things is a change in the proteins that we are producing in combination, in correlation with the foods that we're eating. It's just changing the association our body has with these things. So powerful.
You also have, think about the effect on the microbiome. You have 5 pounds of bacteria living in your intestinal tract right now. And those creatures are living creatures that are eating and drinking and actually defecating inside you right now. You have 5 pounds, a trillion creatures pooing in your intestinal tract right now. And what they poo in you could be really nasty toxic waste like TMA, which becomes trimethylamine oxidase, and maybe why meat eaters get so much more colon cancer and die from heart disease at a faster rate than plant-based eaters do. Because meat eaters have a different microflora than plant eaters do, and so they have different poo. What your bacteria poo inside you depends on what you feed them. If you feed them meat, you get a certain byproduct. If you feed them soluble fibers, you get a completely different, you get vitamin K in fertilizer. So one of the goals we do is to try to feed people in a way that promotes a healthy microbiome. And that means not taking antibiotics and doing things that kind of wipe out the flora, and then feeding them to create an environment in the intestinal tract that favors healthy bacteria. And that's one of the things fasting does. It provides a profound rebooting of this microbiome. In fact, we've done a study with Washington University that where we looked at stool before and after fasting on follow-up, and they're analyzing that data right now. There's interesting people. I mentioned Walter Longo, who's kind of one of my heroes, who's done some fabulous research and published in major impact journals like the Journal of Metabolism in 2015. And they showed tremendous things that go down and tremendous things that go up when people do fasting, even short-term fasting. And of course, these factors are profoundly enhanced with long-term fasting. So the benefits that we're seeing with short-term fasting are very exciting, and they're maybe even more profound when you get people to go for weeks, or sometimes even several weeks, on water only.
Yeah.
Obviously some things like glucose and insulin are profoundly affected. Why do we care about that? Well, not only correcting diabetes, but some of the cravings people get and the binge eating they do and the problems they have regulating weight is in part because they're eating a lot of refined carbohydrates, which drive their insulin up, which then drives sugar down, and the brain thinks that they're starving, and so they're craving more food. And so it's very difficult to get stable apostatic mechanisms working when people's blood sugars and insulin levels are bouncing all over the place. Well, in fasting, you normalize glucose and insulin levels. It's a huge difference. That's why over 80% of our type 2 diabetics are able to achieve normal blood sugar levels without medications. And they've got things like insulin growth factor 1. And the lower your IGF-1 is lower your death rate is, essentially. And so lowering IGF happens with 2 things we know about. One is exercise, and the other is fasting. And you're going to hear this theme over and over again, because the same things that get benefited by exercise also get benefited by fasting. And that's not intuitively obvious, because you say, well, why would exercise, where you're vigorously active, and fasting, where we say you have to rest, induce the same metabolic changes in the body, the same neurochemical changes? Well, it's because I believe that fasting and exercise both have one thing in common. They're undoing the consequence of dietary excess. And so the benefits we see with exercise, we've taken a look at those biomarkers, and you look at them in fasting, and lo and behold, time and time again, you see the same things happen with both types of intervention. Leptin levels. Leptin levels go down with fasting, and lower leptin levels are associated with lower inflammation. There's nothing I've seen that's more powerful at reducing systemic inflammation than water-only fasting. And that's why the diseases associated with inflammation seem to respond. High blood pressure and cardiovascular disease, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, some forms of cancer, all seem to have an inflammation association. And that may be one of the mechanisms by which fasting is helping. We already mentioned blood pressure, heart rate, even things like mTOR. They've identified mammalian target of rapamycin, that the lower the mTOR levels are associated with increased autophagy. And fasting and exercise apparently can lower mTOR levels. We know that the inflammatory markers, the IL-6, the TNF-alpha, all these sophisticated biomarkers, they all go down with fasting during this fasting process. In fact, that's why a lot of the drug companies are interested in fasting. Fasting used to be considered criminal quackery, outrageous behavior. At one point I had to have a criminal defense attorney represent me because fasting was considered so outrageous. Now we've gone from being criminal quacks to cutting edge researchers because major research centers are looking at fasting in part because we know now that fasting can augment the effect even of things like chemotherapy. Longo's done some studies showing that you take rats with cancer and you give them enough chemotherapy to kill all the cancer cells and the rats all die. But if you take the same rats with the same cancer but use intermittent fasting, the rats survive, dramatically enhancing cancer-free survival. And once pharmaceutical companies realized that fasting may augment traditional treatments, then all of a sudden there was some interest. And that's now, because what they're trying to do is come up with what are called fasting mimicking drugs.
Right.
So drugs that would induce the changes that fasting does in the body, but without that nasty fasting, without having to, give up your greasy, fatty, slimy processed foods. You just take the pill, and then you get all these biochemical changes that I've been mentioning. To date, there is no drug that does that,
right.
By the way. The only thing that we know that does it is diet, exercise, and fasting.
And on that note of processed foods, by the way, I'd love for you to make this distinction because, we got listeners who are doing lots of different types of whole food diets, whether it's paleo diet to a vegan diet to raw food diet and everything in between, and making the distinction because a lot of people talk about not eating as much processed foods, but processed meats as well versus whole meats.
Right. Well, yeah, there's clearly, if you're going to be using animal products, you don't want to use highly processed animal food products. You don't want the little nuggets and you don't want the dairy products that are full of oil and salt and sugar, what I call coagulated cow pus in the form of cheese, and these products, highly detrimental, highly allergenic, not foods that we use in feeding our patients before, during, or after fasting. In the case of plant-based foods, vegan foods, for example, may not have animal foods, but they can be highly health compromising, particularly if you're using the chemicals that are added to food that make people fat, sick, and miserable. And that's why we talk about an SOS-free diet. SOS is the international symbol of danger, but it also stands for the chemicals added to food: salt, oil, and sugar. Salt, oil, and sugar are not foods. They're highly processed food byproducts. They're added back to food to stimulate dopamine in the brain, and that's what leads to the overeating and the obesity. If you take the salt, oil, and sugar out of food, you get rid of most of the foods that make people fat, sick, and miserable. For example, people say, well, oil, okay, at 9 calories per gram, highly concentrated. When it's fractionated oil, even olive oil or oils that are somewhat less bad than other oils, they're still lend themselves to dietary excess in terms of obesity. Like McDougall says, the fat you eat's the fat you wear. If you do a fat biopsy, you can actually tell what kind of fat people have been eating just by how it's stored. So, and that's pretty well accepted that lower fat diets may have some benefits in terms of reversing coronary artery disease. Orange has published a bunch of data that's very interesting there. The sugar, most people on both sides of the dietary arguments, whether it be plant-based or animal-based, agree sugar and refined carbohydrates create a lot of problems. You shouldn't be doing a lot of that. Contributes to everything from tooth decay to obesity to immune suppression, changes in microbiome, etc. The one thing that we get a lot of flack about is actually salt, because people realize sodium is an essential nutrient without which you die. And it turns out, just like you get all the fat you need from whole plant foods, you also get all the sugar or carbohydrates you need from whole plant foods. You also get all the salt you need. And adding salt to the diet also contributes to obesity and problems. And you say, well, how could that be? Salt has no calories. It's a mineral. Why would eating a lot of salt contribute to obesity, and it's because salt stimulates what's called passive overeating. So when people, if you just eat your full to reach satiety, say of rice, you'd eat a certain amount of brown rice and then you'd feel full, or potatoes, or whatever it is. But if you take that same person, everything else being equal, salt that up a lot, you'll eat more before you feel satisfied. And people say, well, yeah, because it tastes better. You know, you salt it up, it tastes better, you eat more. And that's exactly right. It tastes better. What tasting better means is more dopamine stimulation in the brain. And so, but more isn't necessarily better when it comes to the drug-like effect of these chemicals on food. And that's why people will eat more of the foods than they should be eating or would be eating in a natural setting, because they've taken basically a highly concentrated substance that used to be so rare they used it as money. It was a precious commodity until we learned how to process foods. And so the bottom line is, salt, oil, and sugar, when they're added to food, result in systematic overeating. They result in obesity. They alter the gut microbiome. They suppress the immune system. And if you eliminate those, you get rid of a lot of the problems that we have today with dietary excess.
Yeah,
You know,
so
that
powerful.
is essentially the issue. And it's true whether you're using animal food or not using animal food. If you're eating highly processed plant foods or highly processed animal foods, you're going to be struggling with obesity and diseases of excess.
8 foods that are stressed out, which is a weird concept, right? But we do it naturally. We drink, some of us drink red wine, which is a stressed grape before we pick it. We often eat colored foods. So spinach is a dark green food. There's blueberries, which are dark. The whiter ones are not as good. So why is that? Well, stressed food produces a lot of what we call xenohermetic molecules. And I'll explain what that means. It's a terrible word we coined, but xeno, X-E-N-O, means from other species. Mm-hmm. And hormesis is a very important word. You got to remember the word hormesis, because every day you should think about it. Hormesis is what doesn't kill us, makes us live longer. And it's a term that means you've got to get your body out of its complacency. You've got to trigger those defenses, those longevity genes. So xenohermesis is you don't have to only run and eat well at the right times, but you can also get these molecules from the right animals and plants, but particularly plants that are stressed. Because when plants are stressed, they're making these molecules of health for their own benefit, right? They're trying to survive. They're turning on their longevity genes. We forget plants have longevity genes too. Mm. So a stressed plant will make these colored molecules to protect from UV and dehydration. When we eat them, they trigger our own body's defenses, and you can get the benefit. So that's nutrition, colored foods, stressed foods. Organic is stressed, right? You don't want the perfect lettuce that's been not put any stress. Mm. And we need to do more of that. We need to let our plants stress a little bit before we eat them. And then nutrition. There's a lot of nutrition. Now, there's a debate every week about what's good. What I do is on the part 3 of the book, I list it out. So I truly believe that we've got to mix it up, right? The secret is not so much what we eat, but when we eat. And also what we eat should have variety. So I don't say only eat meat. I don't say only eat carbohydrate. I eat a little bit of everything. I try to avoid big amounts of meat because there's one of these longevity pathways. Remember I said there are 3 main ones. One of them senses how much meat we eat and amino acids. So you need to give it time to rest and settle down. So that's important. So often I'm not eating a big steak, but I will eat meat if I've worked out because our body needs amino acids. But that's it. Make sure that actually what's more important than what you eat is when you eat. How's that for an interesting thing to say? And what we've discovered with my collaborators, and I need to give a shout out to one of my friends at the NIH, National Institutes of Health, Rafael DeCabo, he studied 10,000 mice. And what he tried to figure out was, is there a diet that makes them live longer? And he mixed combinations of carbohydrate, protein, and fat, and was hoping to see finally what works. And he found out they all did the same thing. They all had short lifespans. But there was one group where he only gave them the food 2 hours a day instead of all throughout the day. And they lived about 20 to 30% longer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Love it. Wow.
So if there's one thing I could say that I've learned after reading 10,000 papers and studying this my whole life, it's eat less often.
That's so good. That's so good. Wow. There's so much good news packed into that. And the first thing is, like, you get to eat. And you can see clearly with a study like that, that we're debating the minutia of your macronutrient ratios, right? And for everybody can be dramatically different. But what we do see across the board is that if you take whatever deliciousness you're trying to have and compact it into a shorter window of time, and giving your body a little bit of a break, you can turn on some of these longevity genes.
That's it. So that's the key. The take-home message here is you want to trick your body into thinking times are tough, adversity, hormesis. Yeah. So you can tell your body through eating stressed foods that times are going to be tough because your food supply is dying. You can trick your body into thinking that you need to be running away from saber-toothed cats because you get on a treadmill or you run or you lose your breath. Or you get hungry during the day. And that also tricks your body into thinking, whoa, I need to fight back against adversity. I need to fight against diseases. And the long-term effect of that, the benefit, is longevity.
Mm. Yeah. So just to take a small step back, because I know that and it's so cool that you talked about this a little bit in the book, but eating it's important as well, because some of us can think, and this is the American way, is like a little of something is good, massive amounts of it must be better, right? So instead of just doing an intermittent fast each day, I'll just fast for, 2 weeks or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so, but then there's this role of something called mTOR that comes into play, and nutrition is involved in that. So can you talk a little bit about this mTOR pathway?
So mTOR is the second leg on the three-legged stool. I mentioned sirtuins.
Yeah.
mTOR is probably the most important to get right. They all talk to each other, but this is a really key one. mTOR is sensing how many amino acids are in your body, particular amino acids, leucine, isoleucine, branched-chain amino acids. And if you're always eating meat every day, your mTOR will be active. mTOR is there to grow new body parts. It's there to grow larger, taller when you're developing. The problem is if you're always feeding it amino acids and trying to bulk up, yeah, you'll get great big muscles and you'll look great. But the long-term effect of that, we've seen in animals at least, is that you're not harnessing your body's defenses, your longevity genes, the mTOR. In this case, you want to turn it off. You want to downplay it because a low mTOR activity predicts longevity. And so that's why I'm mostly focusing on plant-based foods as much as I can. But when I need to bulk up and if I work out typically every Sunday, then I will eat meat. But like you say, give your body a rest, mix it up.
Mm-hmm. So mTOR it's not talked about enough, and especially in the kind of conventional health circles and fitness circles. But this is one of the reasons we need protein. But the great news is that a small amount can go a long way, is what I'm hearing.
Well, it is. It is. And you don't need to restrict everything. It's important to give yourself the ability to repair itself. But if you're always in this rebuild mode, always bodybuilding mode, which, you'll end up looking great, but it actually comes down to vanity versus longevity. Mm. If you only care about vanity, you're going to miss out on the longevity part. So this is the trick, is to do the exercise, do the weightlifting. You need that. I need to do a lot more, but I do it on weekends. But then give your body a break. You don't want to work out hard every day. We know that.
Yeah.
You don't want to eat 3 meals a day. We believe that's bad. And so we have to overturn what we thought, which was more is always better.
So if we can, let's talk about, because we talked about amino acids is thrown in there, but some of the specific nutrients, and one of them is resveratrol. And, we've been hearing this connected with longevity for a while. But for you to say it, it gave me a lot more mental credence as to its value. And because of that, we have the best people in the world here on my team. Somebody who read the book, and they brought in some chocolate for you that we have sitting here, some high quality dark chocolate, because of reading that is one of the sources. For me, immediately, I think back to red wine, and people's like, oh, it's resveratrol, I'm a bottle a day, right? And that's not necessarily what we're going for. There's many other sources.
Well, there is, and you can have it in its pure form too. I do that because the amount that I'm taking, and I've done so for the last 13 years, is the equivalent of 500 bottles of red wine, which I do not recommend for breakfast. Yeah, you might do your liver in. But resveratrol is super interesting because we discovered that it controlled these sirtuin longevity genes. And that was now 13 years ago. And what we've been studying ever since is how do they work and when should we eat it and what does it do? And the good news is that 13 years ago, all we were doing was extending the lifespan of baker's yeast and worms and flies. But now there have been clinical trials and there are products out there that have been tested on many people. And there are clear benefits actually in these placebo-controlled trials, which are essential. Otherwise, you don't know for sure. And you see a lowering of blood sugar, you see improvements in liver function. And these studies finally show that what we saw in mice, or initially in 2006, which, by the way, that study we put out sent red wine sales up 30%, and they stayed up. So anyone who has been taking red wine for the drinking red wine for the last few years, you're welcome. But seriously, what we saw in the mice was that they were protected against high-fat food. They were just as healthy against an American bad diet, wow. And they lived as long as a healthy, lean one. But that's not an excuse to just sit around on the couch and pop resveratrol, by no means. What's often missed, even by scientists, is the data that's in the back of those papers. Two important points. One is, if you take resveratrol every other day, you get the greatest benefit. And we've had mice living over 3 years, which is a long time for a mouse. They typically die a bit over 2. And the second thing that we learned was that if you eat it with fatty foods, it's actually better. Or you eat it with a bit of oil, it gets into the body a lot better. And so that's why I mix my resveratrol with some yogurt, just a couple of spoons in the morning. I don't want to eat a big breakfast. But without that, a lot of it's not even making it into your system. And there have been clinical trials that have failed. And when I look at how they did it, they were giving their patients or their subjects a capsule with water. And that's not going to work.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's really fascinating. I never thought about that. So it has a fat-soluble aspect to it.
Oh, for sure. It's like brick dust. Chemists would tell you brick dust. And unless it's dissolved, it just pretty much won't get absorbed by the gut.
And so we know red wine's a source. What else do we have? Besides, and also supplements. For
sure. Well, I take the supplement because you'd have to eat a lot of chocolate as well.
Yeah, right.
But, let me just make it clear that I don't know if it's going to make me live any longer. But I can tell you my cardiovascular system looks like it's a 20-year-old. So that's good. So far, so good. But what else can we do? We could, peanuts, have a little bit. But unlike a lot of things we can do in our diet, resveratrol isn't found in huge quantities. There's only 1 milligram or 2 in red wine even. Yeah. And I'm taking between 500 and 1,000 milligrams.
I love the fact that you mentioned the cycling aspect. And this is true with so much. Because again, we have that some is good, more is better. Let me just do this every day. And I love the concept and also just the practicality of cycling nutrients. Because even if you just think about the way that we evolved, we're not having the same thing every day.
Yeah, and here's the great news. We used to think that calorie restriction was the way to go. And we've known for thousands of years that being hungry is good for you. But we used to think that based on monkey studies and rat studies, that those animals and we would always have to be hungry. But you've got to pulse it. You're allowed to eat and be full once in a while. And that's great news because if you give mice and rodents now, rats, food during the day, they can eat 90% of what they would normally eat in a calorie-restricted diet, but be hungry all the time. So we can live great lives. I eat a late lunch or skip lunch, but then I typically eat a really nice dinner. And I've actually grown to love food a lot more for that reason.
Wow,
because you do appreciate food rather than just shoving it down during the day. But I think I live, first of all, a much healthier life, but also one where I'm a lot more grateful for food.
Yeah, and I could personally affirm that experience. And I remember, this is over a decade ago, but I would go. This is one of the things that makes me good at what I do is that experimentation. So I would do several weeks of fasting where I'm just having juice, right? It's vegetable juice. And I remember I've shared this story before, but it might be hard to believe, but I didn't eat a salad, like an actual salad, until I was about 25 years old. That was the first time I ever had one in my life. I was raised on like fish sticks and like I was probably like 4% ravioli, like just in my blood, right? And so eating a salad just was out of my paradigm. It's just like, why would I do that? And I remember after a 21-day fast, I went and got a salad. And prior to this, just a couple weeks before I did the fast, I tried to eat the salad, went right to the trash can, gagging, okay? I got the salad and I took the first bite and my brain is just like lighting, just like, this is so good. I can't, but I was still scared. I'm like, I'm gonna throw up any moment. And I took the next bite and I'm just like, this is the greatest thing I've ever eaten in my life. And I ate the whole little salad I'd gotten for myself. It was at Whole Foods, just like tucked in a corner. And this is true story. I was walking out, I threw the box away, and I told a random person, I was like, I just ate a salad. And they looked at me like I was from another planet. They were like, oh, okay, you know? And I was just blown away at how much I appreciated eating after not eating for so long, right? And so having those moments, even now, you know, just intermittent fasting through the day, I totally agree. Last night we had dinner. I was really crushing it yesterday, just working, doing some stuff behind the scenes. We had dinner. It was like the best meal I ever had in my life, you know? And I've had that same food before, but it's just, I appreciated it so much more.
Well, I'll confess something for the first time on your show. Now that I appreciate food and I know that food is not just pleasurable, it's actually good for you, I'll go back to my old habits, and there's food around us. That's the problem. It's everywhere. Yeah. So your reptilian brain will pick up something, shove it in your mouth, and then I'll think, that's in my mouth. Why did I do that? And I'll go through the calculation. Does this meet the criteria of whether it's worthy of eating? Do I swallow? And occasionally I'll say, no, it's not worth swallowing this crap. I don't even enjoy this. And if I'm not enjoying it, it's not worth it. So, you know, I know there's eating disorders. This is not one of those, but I only put in my mouth now what I really want to eat.
Yeah.
But I love it.
Yeah. Fascinating. You know, just opening up this conversation and looking at the different dimensions of how it's not just the food that we're eating, but how we're doing it, right? When we're eating has a huge role to play. It's just, it broadens the conversation, because I think we really can easily get caught up in the minutia, like we talked about earlier, you know, like trying to get your macronutrient ratios correct. That stuff matters, but there's a bigger conversation. And getting more into this bigger conversation in the book, you also stretch out and you get into conversation and things that we've got science behind that were really counterintuitive for me, or things that, for example, metformin, right? When I want to talk about this, I spent over a decade working in my clinical practice as a nutritionist alongside physicians to help get people off metformin. And then seeing this data that you're sharing in the book, that metformin might actually be one of those, well, it is, according to your data, those things that can help to switch on those longevity genes. So let's talk a little bit about that. So just if you can, for everybody, share what is metformin and why is this something that folks are now who don't have diabetes are taking?
Yeah, so metformin is one of those gifts to humanity. It's on the list. So the World Health Organization has called it an essential medicine for humanity, because it's so safe. It's not perfectly safe, but it's so safe. And the benefits are really clear, especially for diabetics. So there are these three legs to the stool, the three pillars. Sirtuins we talked about. We talked about mTOR and amino acids. The third one is called AMPK, or AMP kinase. And this protein senses how much energy we have in the body. And if we have low amounts of energy, then it'll try to make more, and that's actually healthy. So you want to also trick your body into thinking it has low energy. You don't want low energy, but you can trick your body. So how do you do that? One is to be hungry, one is to exercise, and the other is to take a medicine that inhibits mitochondria and lowers the amount of energy that the cell's producing, so the body goes, holy crap, we're running out of energy, and it'll try to make more. And that's good for you. Now, the side effect of that is having better blood sugar levels. So your body becomes what's called insulin sensitive. You know this, that when you're type 2 diabetic, your body doesn't register the insulin that your pancreas is putting out, and it just makes more and more insulin, and eventually your pancreas can give out. But the problem with it is you have high amounts of sugar glucose in your bloodstream, which will cross-link proteins and accelerate aging and all sorts of problems. Cardiovascular disease, wounds won't heal. And this is truly accelerating aging. We've proven that in our field. Metformin is shown to be very effective against type 2 diabetes. And if you have type 2 diabetes, your doctor will typically put you on that medicine. Now, it comes from the French lilac. It's derived from a plant. So it's a xenohermetic molecule, actually. But it's classified as a drug. So it falls into that category. So in this country, at least, but not all, you need to get a prescription for it, which actually puts it out of reach for many people. But it also makes a lot of people wary that if it comes from a doctor, it might be a little bit fishy, might be toxic. But it really has been shown in a study of over 100,000 people now, many studies actually, that diabetics who take metformin in the long run aren't just better off for diabetes, but are actually healthier and protected against cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, and frailty, even more so than people who don't take metformin and who don't have type 2 diabetes. That's stunning.
Yeah.
And when I heard that, I didn't believe it. My friend Neil Barzilai, Dr. Neil Barzilai is the world's expert. He told me that, and I had to go and check on these papers, which I reference in the book. It's true. So I've become a real convert. And about 2 or so years ago, I started taking metformin. I don't have diabetes yet, but I was on my way up. I actually mapped my trajectory over the last 11 years, and I could see I was headed for diabetes. It's in my family. So I stopped it in its tracks and actually reversed type 2 diabetes. Now I'm at no risk of having diabetes because I'm on metformin, because I've made these changes in my life. Now, is it for everybody? I think if you're young and your blood glucose levels are low, not needed. If you're exercising and eating right. But I'm 50 now, and if your blood glucose goes up every year and you can't control that, metformin, I think, is a good thing to talk about with your doctor.
Yeah. You know what? And just since you just mentioned that being 50, if folks aren't watching the video on YouTube, you look like maybe 30s, like 35, You have this, and your energy is high. You're creating all these different projects, working on different papers. So you have that aspect. Your physical appearance, like you're living proof of the stuff you talk about. And I can see you're just getting warmed up as well, And so just a little shout out for those who are listening to audio. The guy's got it dialed in, And so, but I wanted to bring this up because I also, with the Model Health Show, I want to stretch our thinking. We do, like I mentioned, I was looking at what can I do for these patients to help them to normalize their blood sugar naturally, right? And removing the cause oftentimes was, Mountain Dew or whatever it was, but if we eliminate those things and your body is already in a healthy state, adding in these different medications, potentially, again, this is just a conversation I want to get going, there might be some potential benefits. And this is still early, but it really got me thinking when I was reading the book. And one of the other aspects, I think this might go back to, because for me, I think that metformin can compete with some of the hormetic benefits of other things potentially, right? So can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe let's talk about exercise in that context, because it's a hormetic stressor.
Yeah.
So how does that compete?
Yeah, so remember we're working with a very complex machine, our bodies, and there are these 3 legs of the stool, but we don't know exactly which ones to tweak and when. We're still figuring this out as scientists. The good news is that we live in a world now where scientists can talk directly to the public, and we put out newsletters, so you don't have to wait 10 years to hear it from your doctor, or 20 years. But the honest truth is we don't know exactly what the best combination is, and we're learning actually that sometimes you don't want to combine them at the same time. You might want to do them on off days, and metformin and exercise is a case in point. Now, what we've just discovered in a couple of papers that came out this year only is that metformin, because it tricks the body into having low energy by inhibiting the mitochondrial energy levels, if you give elderly patients metformin and give them ask them to do weightlifting, they will bulk up, both of them, all right, both sets, with metformin, without, but the ones that didn't get metformin will have bigger muscles, okay? But not a lot bigger. They all got bigger muscles. So it is inhibiting the growth, the hypertrophy of muscle. But here's what's not talked about on social media or appreciated by a lot of people. Those elderly people, were all the same strength. even though they didn't have the same sized muscles. So it still gave them the benefits. They just didn't look as bulky. So that's where I go back to vanity versus longevity.
Right.
But I think there is a way to optimize it. We don't know for sure. And Dr. Peter Attia, our friend, he argues this with me. And he also agrees, at least on this point, that we don't want to be taking metformin on days where our muscles are growing. That's probably the best. And that's what I try to do. I skip metformin when I go to the gym. But we disagree on exactly what the precise combination is. But he also thinks that fasting for a long time is good. And I don't know if that's true. I find it extremely difficult to go for more than one day. I start to lose, my blood sugar goes too low, and I've measured it with one of those monitors that you can stick them on.
Right.
Fascinating, by the way. Have you done that?
Yeah, the 24-hour, I mean, it just stays with you.
2
I haven't,
weeks,
no. Yeah, many of my friends have.
You learn a lot. And actually, I didn't have breakfast. I can feel it right now. My blood sugar levels are going low. I should eat some chocolate, actually. But yeah, if I go for 3 days or a week like Peter does, he actually is turning on pathways that I think are even more beneficial.
Yeah.
There's one called chaperone-mediated autophagy, which is basically super recycling of the body's proteins. And that's something I think that he's right about. And if you can go for 3 days, more power to you.
Right. Yeah. And I love that so much because when I made the reference earlier about some is good, more massive amounts is great. There's usually something there in the middle or closer towards, that little bit, those little micro doses, and having an extended fast, of a few days. Obviously, you're going to activate more of these different beneficial processes, autophagy, and the list can go on and on. But we also have to be mindful of the longevity aspect of happiness. I think that we don't talk enough about this. First of all, and this is just something consistent that I see, I'll read, I don't know why I do this all the time, but whenever something comes across my attention or my phone or a friend or somebody that lives to be 100 years old or older, I interview them, I read their stories, I read their articles, and there's this consistent thread of happiness. There's this consistent thread of meaning in their lives, So if you're going to be pissed for 3 days and just a Krabby Patty, right? Just mad at everybody, really, it doesn't equal out for me the potential benefit that you could be getting.
Yeah, that's right. So when we calorie restrict these mice in my lab, they also get really crabby. They fight with each other, especially the boys. So it's natural, but you need to overcome it. Yeah. But I totally agree that if you're not happy, it's not worth it. But the key to happiness is mission. Yeah. And I just came from a conference where we were talking about how to optimize those 3 legs on the stool. And one of the speakers was Dr. Cooper. He's the guy that coined the term aerobics. And you might, wow, he must be 100 years old. He's almost. I mean, he's in his late 80s. But he's had a mission in life to make people live longer. And he's treated presidents, the first Bush, George Bush. And his mind is super quick. He's talking like this, bam, bam, bam. You think, you're not 80, you're more like a 20-year-old in the way you talk and think and move. Now, these are test cases. These aren't clinical trials. But when you see him, he's been doing aerobics for the last 40, 50 years. I mean, a guy like that, you want to mimic that. And what he's shown in thousands of patients that he's treated and tens of thousands of kilometers or miles that his patients have run, he can reduce the rate of aging, clearly. And through the trajectory of his patients, instead of the average lifespan being 80, which is what it is at best for this country, he gets them out to near 90. So it's clearly the case that if you do what he's recommending, you eat the right way, starting at an earlier age, you don't have to live to 80. You can play tennis at 90, maybe live to 100.
Yeah.
But wait till there's new technologies coming.
Yeah, so exciting. And that's why people have to stay connected to you to learn more about this. And speaking of mission, I want to ask you personally, what is the model that you're setting for other people with how you live your life personally, right? The way that you're conducting yourself, your business, your research, what is your bigger mission that you're wanting to express or to achieve with your life right now?
Well, I think it's the same as a lot of successful people. I'd be surprised if you don't feel the same way. We know we're going to die, right? There'll be a day where we know this is it. We're done for, unless you get hit prematurely by a bus or something. When that moment happens, I want to be able to say to myself, I did the most I could to leave the world a better place than I found it. And it can be a little bit, it can be a big bit, but you got to put everything into it. And I think that humanity can do a lot better. There's far too much complacency and giving up. And a lot of us just give up. They say the world can't be changed. But, friends of ours, we all agree that if you have a mission, just pick something that you're good at and you like and never give up. That's the secret. Life's tough. It's long. If you're not driven every day to get up and do something that you love and you think that it's worthwhile, it's a tough life.
Glucosamine. God, someone's gonna put it in your show and tell me exactly what it is. But when I was maybe 14, I read in some Men's Health magazine or something that you should try this. So I bought it, and man, my knees feel way better. And I didn't know why, other than it said it was supposed to work. And I tried a different brand. It didn't work as well. And I figured out the form that worked. And it was just a titration exercise. If I take it, can I play soccer or not? And it turns out glucosamine now we know has a bunch of anti-aging powers because it changes the way mitochondria use sugar. So it was probably helping with my blood sugar. And it's an anti-aging substance that is widely talked about that almost no one knows. Think, oh, it's just for joints. No, it's for inflammation. So I talk about the pathways in there. It's dirt cheap. So it's a really good idea to be taking glucosamine on a regular basis if you want to live a long time and not have joint replacement surgery 25 years from now.
And there you have it. So we talked about the 4 killers. Then you shift gears and you talk about 7 pillars of aging. So these are the 7 things that are really little known, in my opinion, that are the biggest catalysts that are moving us towards aging. So we talked about don't die.
Yep.
Now we're looking at the things that accelerate our aging. And I want to go through just a couple of these.
All right.
The first one was mitochondrial mutations.
Yep.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So mitochondria, you have anywhere between 200 to 15,000 mitochondria inside each cell in your body, except your red blood cells. They're free of mitochondria. And the cells that have the most energy requirement have the most of these things, the ones that are most important. So your brain cells and heart cells are the most studded with mitochondria. And they're smart little things. And you get all their DNA from your mom, at least if you're like most people. There's a few other weird corner cases where other stuff happens. But essentially, these are passed down from 9 women in somewhere 11, 12,000 years ago. All of us are related to one of 9 great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great grandmothers. And problem is that these mitochondria mutate relatively easily over the course of your life. And it doesn't mean you won't hand on the right genes to your offspring, but as they mutate, you don't make energy as well. And what happens every time when your mitochondria can't turn a molecule of food and a molecule of oxygen into an electron, it makes inflammation. Inflammation leads to diabetes and all the 4 killers. So these mutations build up and we don't have repair systems. So what do? There's practices that don't cost anything that are in Superhuman that cause mitochondrial biogenesis. There's relatively affordable, like $50, $60 affordable compounds that grow new mitochondria. There's certain types of exercise. There's types of sleep. So what you want to do is put your body through these brief periods of intense stress so the body looks around and goes, oh, that mitochondria can't really make heat right now, or it can't make energy right now. I guess I should kill it. Because your body will prune the weak, mutated mitochondria and kick their asses out of there and grow fresh young ones if you give it the right instructions. Guess what? We have not been taught to give it the right instructions. Mother Nature was very elegant in our design because 150 years ago, there was probably some angry buffalo chasing you every now and then, or a tiger trying to eat you, and there was times you didn't have any food, and there were times you were a little cold, and the body would go, oh, I guess I should take care of this. Well, we don't get any of that anymore, and it turns out those are important signals. They're just unpleasant. So how do we get those signals to happen in the minimum possible amount of time with the least inconvenience and the least cost? I'm down for that, and that's what's in Superhuman.
One of the things that's so fascinating about that is that today we know that it's not just our DNA that we need to be concerned about. We've got trillions of bacteria that live with us, that live within us, on our skin and in our bodies. And they have their own genes. Our mitochondria has its own DNA that can get damaged. And so we need to look out for the well-being of not just our DNA, but our mitochondrial DNA can get damaged even easier, which is just super fascinating to me. And this is one of the things that you really highlight and talk about in the book.
When you really think about it, we have this collection of bacteria and it talks to our bacteria and there's all kinds of cross reactions. Wired magazine had an article a few years ago that had the best headline, I think, of any article I've ever seen. And it said something like, "You are surrounded by a cloud of fart bacteria." You're like, great, guys. I'm horrified, or skin and fart bacteria. But what the point of the article was is that with genetic sequencing, when we leave this room 2 hours from now, they could come in with the forensics team, measure the microbiome in the air, and determine that we were in this room if they know our microbiome. Okay, so it's not just our bodies. There's no sovereign entity. There's no boundary to where you are. But what that means is you're a hollow tube, right? Because food comes in, it replaces cells in your body, and then you shed your skin and you poop out the other stuff. So you and me, our bodies don't even exist. We're just like a whirlpool in a stream. There's matter coming in, there's matter coming out. That's super powerful because that means you can modify the matter coming in. And what can you do to make the whirlpool that is you more coherent to stick around for longer? That's anti-aging.
So the next one of these pillars, and I'm so grateful that you talked about this one, was zombie cells. Zombie cells. Can you talk about what that is?
As you age, your body has cells that stop doing their job, but they don't get out of the way. They call them senescent cells as the scientific term. So now we've got these cells that are sitting there. They make free radicals. They take up space, but they don't do their job. So the question now is, all right, if I want to be young when I'm old, how do I make sure I don't have very many zombie cells floating around? When you're young, you don't have many. As you age, they go up predictably. So it turns out that there are some of the things that are similar to creating new mitochondria, things you can do that help. Fasting helps. There's enzymes that you can take that help. And there's even some new drugs that are radically shown to improve cell senescence. And what that means is that as you age, you're probably going to have to just figure this out. And the techniques, there's a list of bullet points in here of things you can do now. Some of them are billionaire techniques. And I mean, I've done crazy stem cell things, probably more stem cells in one sitting than any human ever as part of the research for this. But hey, I'm going to live to 180. Someone had to do it. And everything in here, there's a free version that gives you the benefits, most we can get. And then there's this is what crazy people are doing. I haven't done it yet, but I'm signed up, or this is something I did do. But just like cell phones, if we go back 20, 30 years, the only person with a cell phone was the investment banker, and the whole trunk of their car was the phone, and this giant thing up to their head, and it's $25 a minute, and everyone would swear at them. Look at that. Who does he think he is with his cell phone? And now they're $1 a month in Africa. Okay. Anti-aging technologies are the same as cell phones. They are coming. Some of them are expensive now. Some of them are cheap now. You just don't know about them. But the expensive ones, they'll drop in price just like computer chips. And the demand is that strong. And it's our job as podcasters, as health influencers, just tell people, hey, this stuff is real. And once the demand is there, I promise you, as an entrepreneur, that we will make it for you at a price you can afford, because that's what entrepreneurs do.
All right, so we know that we have these zombie cells, potential zombie cells. And this goes back to this conversation about apoptosis, this programmed cell death. So what I'm hearing is that we don't need to be as concerned about overpopulation out there as overpopulation in our bodies.
It's a good point. If you have overpopulation of zombie cells, you have an issue. Yeah. But one of the other pillars of aging is actually cell loss. And as you age, you run out of stem cells. And that means you get tissue exhaustion, something called sarcopenia, or loss of muscle mass. There's a reason when you have the stereotypical picture of an older person, there's thin skin, they're frail, they don't have muscle mass. Well, that is all tissue loss. So what would happen if you could make your stem cells stay strong? What if you could replace your stem cells? Would you reduce sarcopenia? What if you just did things that didn't let your cells die as much as they did before? And what if you caused programmed cell death for the cells that needed to die, like cancer cells, and had a healthy immune system? So those are the things that I write about in Superhuman. And the deal is, this is like multiple college courses in weird biology that no one is actually going to study. So it comes down to, at the end of the chapter, there's a set of bullet points, and I'll walk you through the whys and the hows, but you do a few of these things. Don't even do all of them. Just do some of them. And all of a sudden, the number of years that you get goes up, maybe. We think, hopefully. And certainly what's going to happen is you're not going to feel like garbage when you're old. And that's really important. So you just don't lose when you do this.
Yeah. So we've got cell loss. We've got mitochondrial mutations.
Right.
Zombie cells. So with the zombie cell thing, so what you're really saying is there's we could have a zombie apocalypse. Potentially. Is that what you're saying?
In fact, part of aging is a zombie apocalypse.
Okay.
It's
you heard it here first. Dave said it. It's the real thing.
Yeah.
So zombie apocalypse actually takes place 3 foods you have to eat for a year. What are they?
Three foods only for a year? I would say you really are not going to be very happy unless you have some avocados. Right? Pretty stereotypical answer,
There you
though.
go.
But bottom line
Check.
is it's got fat and carbs in it. It's pretty good. I'm going to tell you straight up, grass-fed ribeye is going to be really important. You've got to get those fat-soluble nutrients in the meat, and you're going to want some of that protein. The great thing, though, and we didn't talk about this much, most people listening right now are eating too much protein. You don't need that much protein, but you need very high-quality protein. So who cares if the ethically raised grass-fed animal is twice as expensive as the industrial mistreated animal? You eat half as much of it, and you replace those protein calories with fat calories from clean fats and with more vegetables. And that works out really, really well for the planet, for the soil, which requires animal poop to be fertile, and things like that. That's why a grass-fed steak is on there, and specifically ribeye, because it's the fattiest cut.
Yeah.
And the third thing is a real tough one. I'm going to pick sun-dried black olives because they taste good.
Okay.
It's because you actually need some monounsaturated fat for your cell membranes. I'm going to get my saturated fat from the steak. I'm going to get my monounsaturated fat from the avocado. I'll get a little bit of undamaged, because you eat avocados raw, omega-6s, which turns out your cells need some of that, but not very much. And then I'm going to fill the rest in with the polyphenols from the olives.
Yeah.
And polyphenols are these colored compounds from plants that control a lot of what your gut bacteria do and what your mitochondria do. They're even necessary for making melanin, the pigment in your skin. And so there you go. I'm going to have basically guacamole, sun-dried olives on grass-fed steak, and I'm going to feel great.
There you go. And no zombies eating you.
Absolutely.
I love that. And I'm glad you mentioned that we do need some omega-6s, because they've really been drugged through the mud for good reason.
Yeah.
But the quality, getting them from a good source. But they're still there as, quote, essential fatty acids. So we need them from our diet.
They're essential because you can't make them. And what I found was fascinating new research that didn't even exist when I wrote the Bulletproof Diet. And I was right, fortunately, in the Bulletproof Diet, just from talking with clinicians and just saying what works, but we didn't actually measure it. And researchers went through and they looked at what the fat ratios of cell membranes are for different types of cells in the body. And then they measured what happens when you change the type of fat you eat. And it turns out that your adipose tissue, the fat in your body, it swings with what you eat very dramatically. So if you eat a lot of omega-6 fats, you will store way more omega-6 fat in your fat tissue, and it'll create inflammation there. So if you do that, though, your brain won't change nearly as much as your fat tissues do. So you can control inflammation by controlling the ratio of the fats you eat. And since 45% of your brain cells are saturated fats, just like in the Bulletproof Diet, I did say 50% of your fat calories should be saturated. I was off by 5%, man. Sorry. But there's pretty good evidence for it. In fact, the body will manufacture palmitic acid.
Yeah,
So it's really fascinating that that the cells in your brain, the cells in your heart, the cells in your muscles, they do different things when you change the type of fat you eat. They all require omega-6, but it's a relatively small amount, and it's got to be undamaged omega-6. If it's been extracted from corn, safflower, canola, soy, they use hexane and other solvents. They use heat. And omega-6 oils, even from flax, they're unstable in light, sunlight, light from the incandescents or LEDs in your house, heat, and oxygen break these things down. So you pretty much want to eat them when they're fresh inside a nut that hasn't been roasted, when they're in an avocado, when they're in olive oil that has antioxidants that protect them and hasn't been deep fried or heated in a pan. It's that important.
Yeah. And I definitely want to talk about this one, which is cellular straitjackets.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
We all know what it's like to get a callus. And you're saying, oh, my skin isn't flexible right there. It's on my foot, whatever. Well, the same thing happens in your cells. And we build something called amyloid plaques throughout the body. Most people have heard of amyloid plaques because of Alzheimer's disease, where there's something called beta amyloid. Well, whenever there's inflammation throughout your body, you build up these plaques, and these are like straitjackets. They keep your cells from doing what they're supposed to do. So we got to ask ourselves, what do we know about what causes plaque to form? And once you realize that, amyloid can be affected by all kinds of dietary things, by all kinds of exercise things, and there's even some new drugs that can reverse this kind of formation of amyloid, you realize it's the same thing as a professional ball player, right? Maybe if someone hits you in the knee 15 times, you're going to need a knee replacement. But if you could get hit in the knee less, you'll need less replacement. So this is the scar tissue that builds up over time in or around the cells. And you got to do something if you have a lot of it. And this is a real simple thing. Look, if you're 20 years old, like, man, I'm just going to make a few changes. These aren't painful changes. These aren't changes that take any more energy than what you already do. You're just going to change a habit from A to B, right? Equal amount of pleasure, equal amount of time, equal amount of money. But the new one, I got less amyloid forming. And if you're older, you're saying, all right, I'm definitely going to stop pouring gas on the fire, and maybe I'll actually reverse it.
I love that visual of thinking about a straitjacket with ourselves.
It's like that. And they got to move around. And it's fascinating when you dig into this cellular biology. People don't know this, but those little mitochondria inside a cell, they have a way to move around. They'll actually make a little transport thing like a bus. They call it a shuttle. And then a mitochondria like, oh, I need more energy over here. They'll move a power plant like they do for a concert. Like it'll go through the neuron and go over here where it can make some energy, and then it'll move back over here. There's crazy levels of stuff that's totally invisible to us. No one knew about this 30 years ago because we just couldn't see it. And now we're looking at stuff happening inside of our cells. In fact, just last year, they found another organ system that no one knew about in the skin because they only looked at the skin of dead animals under a microscope. It's like, oh, we can look at live animals, and holy crap, there's this whole part of the lymph system that no one knew about. So we don't know very much, but we know way more than we did, and that can guide us in what to do. So you feel good when you're old and you live longer.
Yeah, and one of those things that tightens the straitjacket more than anything, well, one of the strongest things for us to be aware of is these advanced glycation end products.
Yep.
Right? Yeah.
Now, I wrote about advanced glycation end products in the Bulletproof Diet, and there's two forms of these that we get. This is what happens when you get a sugar and it interacts with a protein, and they stick together to form a hard to break down compound that creates free radicals. And easiest way to envision this, you throw onions in a pan, turn on the pan, you get browned onions. The brown stuff is advanced glycation end product. Now, I made the argument in the Bulletproof Diet that eating advanced glycation end products is probably a bad idea, but even worse is eating a large amount of sugar or any other food that raises blood sugar. Because if you got sugar coursing around in your body and your body is made out of protein, fat, and water, you're going to get advanced glycation end products inside your arteries, inside your cells.
So you're caramelizing yourself.
Yeah. So number one, don't eat sugar. And if you have 3 grams of sugar, no one cares. Right? Like seriously. But if you do what most people do, I'll just have a few of these little candies, and I'll have a whole bunch of ice cream, and I'll do a bunch of this, a bunch of that. That does cause advanced glycation, which contributes to aging via pathways we understand. It creates these amyloids. So what about eating then? Well, since 2014, when the Bulletproof Diet came out, there's been a little bit more research. And there are now several studies that I cite in Superhuman about the effects of eating advanced glycation end products. And here's the deal. Food that is highly caramelized, like caramel, is bad for you. It increases your aging because it's full of AGEs. It says right there in the name. And when you look at things like overcooking meat and charring meat, it is a well-known risk. And when someone says eating meat's bad for you, massive question. How did you cook it? Because a deep-fried, microwaved, char-grilled, smoked, and dipped in honey sauce piece of meat is still meat. It just might have a different effect on you than a piece of sashimi, which is also meat. You have to think about it. It's not as simple as saying meat is good or bad. That's dumb. And I can tell you plants aren't good or bad either, because if you walk outside right now and you take a bite of the first plant you see, if you don't end up in the hospital, you're going to end up in the bathroom, because most plants will kill you if you eat them. So it's simplistic and stupid to be plant-based or animal-based. Those are meaningless, and this is a prime example of why. And so burned meat, particularly bad for you.
Yeah. You know what's so funny? We've been having these little synchronicities. I read that in the book yesterday about caramelizing your insides. Yeah. And then for the first time in my relationship with my wife, we've been together for 16 years, and she made something with caramelized onions. I was like, this is so interesting. Like, first time ever. And then, we got here and we had I brought you some Ease Magnesium. Yeah. Right, from our friend Ian Clark, which is a topical magnesium. It's great for pain relief and relaxation, all that good stuff. And you had a little bit of a tweak to your back because of wrestling a pig or something?
Yeah, I do live on a farm, and one of the things that I talk about here for natural killer cells is funny. If you breathe the things that trees make, things called terpenes, some of the essential oils, It actually increases natural killer cell activities in the body. It changes your microbiome, especially live on a farm. So I'm on a small farm. We have 8 pigs and 10 sheep. Actually, we have 9 sheep now. One of them just died, and the turkey vultures ate its eyes. It was horrifying. Wow. I'm telling you, Mother Nature does not want you to live, just in case you're wondering. You got to take ownership of that. Anyhow, we're moving the pigs from one place to another. And the pig's job in nature, they're awesome. They clean up the land. So you move them around and they pile up the rocks, they get rid of all the brush, they break up stumps, and that's why we have wild pigs in our ecosystem. And then what comes out of that is an amazing pasture. And then the sheep come in and their job is just to shit everywhere. And they're walking fertilizer machines that cause the soil to build up mass, which pulls carbon dioxide out of the air. And it's this beautiful system, and I'm living in it, and I can see it. But that means you got to move the damn pigs from one thing to another. And pigs, they're made out of bacon, which means they're not that smart. And they actually are kind of smart. Anyway, I'm pushing on this pig, and he won't move into his new thing. And I'm pushing and pushing, and finally the pig decides to move forward. And I'm like, do I want to faceplant in the mud? No. I'm like, thank God this is not on social media. So I'm leaning forward, and I stuck my left leg out behind me to counterbalance me, like basically a one-legged forward yoga pose thing. And I sprained my back. And I didn't know at the time, like, oh, that didn't feel very good. And we got all the pigs moved, but it's been a little tweaked ever since. Yeah. So I'm walking around with a pig-induced injury.
You know, and again, it was a good synchronicity. I just happened to bring that to you for a gift. Like, I was looking around, like, what can I bring Dave today? And it just jumped out at me.
Thank you.
Yeah, so cool. And then, of course, you were looking for a phone charger. I put one in my bag today for the first time, but we found an alternative.
Yeah, that was awesome.
So caramelized onions, man. But listen.
And I want to say something, though, about caramelized onions. Look, they taste good. Fajitas are awesome. Although the bell peppers are nightshades, they're probably not that good for you. But here's the deal. If you eat caramelized onions occasionally, it's all right. Yeah. Right? It's a delicacy. If you eat caramelized onion smoothies because you think they're healthy, you're doing it wrong. Yeah. Right? Like there's limits and there's normal amounts of things. But if you eat caramelized onions in every meal and you say, you know what, I'm going to have dessert afterwards, and I'm going to have sugar for breakfast, and I'll have sugar for lunch, and sugar for dinner, and all these peaks of blood sugar, you are going to get old, and you're not going to like what it feels like when you're old. Yeah. And that's the mindset here. Perfection is one of those things that will make you old. Right. Because you worry all the time, and worry makes you old. There's a huge amount of stuff in Superhuman about stress and what it does for you. So this isn't about orthorexia. This isn't about being perfect. It's like, look, what if you cook the onions a little bit less? And it still tasted good. Like, could you make a soup that way? Could you make the meal you wanted to make? And if you could, less caramelizing is preferable. But it's not going to kill you if you caramelize your onions, because that's the way your mom did it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up, because that's one of the things we tend to turn to is just like, so you're saying I can't.
Yeah.
So you're saying I can't have. And really what it's going to ultimately boil down to is that stress of trying to do everything perfect is aging you. You know, like you just said.
Absolutely.
And just understanding, like, there's so many great things for us to take advantage of. We just want to err on the side of those things that are extending our lifespan and avoiding the things. But you were pretty hardcore on avoiding the fried foods, right?
That really matters. And in fact, everything in Superhuman is written through this lens of ROI, return on investment. And everything we do is an investment, but it's not an investment of dollars. That's really like a capitalist American mindset. It's an investment of energy, right? Energy more so than time. Because really, if you have a whole day and you feel like crap, it's not really very useful time. So it's all about your energy first, time second, dollars third, right? And when you look at things like that, all right, what takes the least amount of energy, the least amount of time, the least amount of dollars to give me the most return that I'm seeking? And the return that we're seeking in Superhuman is you want to feel good when you're old, and you want to have more years of your life. So that's the mindset here. And I'll tell you, if you want to get old real fast, use weasel words. And that's a thing from my last book, Game Changers. But can't, need to, and things like have to, and impossible, and try. So I'm going to try to do the things in the book. No, you're not. You already presuppose failure. And you say, I can't do it. Bullshit. You probably aren't going to do it, but maybe you can do it. You just don't know how, right? But if you tell yourself you can't, you won't ever look for how. So stuff like that, mindset is a part of aging. And I tell you, the most important thing that you could do to live a long time, Shawn, isn't anything in the book other than maybe the first chapter, where you look at your picture of aging. And if your picture of aging is wheelchairs, diapers, putting your car keys in the fridge, and tubes and monitors, and an empty bank account, that's probably where you're going to end up. So you change your picture of aging right now to say, I am vibrant, I am walking around, I have healthy relationships, I have friends, I have family, I'm taking care of my community, and my brain works. And that's what the future holds. That will make you age less. And that is provable. There are many studies like that. So just erase the garbage in your mind about old age being infirm and weak and feeble and unable to care for yourself or others. That is not how it was ever meant to be throughout history. And that's not how it is today unless you let it happen.
Yeah, love it, man. Wow. You know, there's so many things I want to ask you about, but I don't want to glance over something you said earlier. You said melanin. And you actually made it a point to talk specifically about melanin in relationship to longevity. What's up with that?
This is something, it's some of the most fascinating science out there. Melanin makes our skin dark, but there's melanin deep inside your eyes and inside your brain. In fact, scientists used to call this junk melanin. And I learned about this when I was doing the research for Headstrong, my mitochondria science, how to hack your brain book. And it turns out melanin has a superpower. It's unbelievable. It can actually make extra electrons outside of the way normal electrons are made in the body. And it makes electrons when it's heated or vibrated. And that means that the reason your brain has extra melanin that no one could explain, whenever scientists call something junk, it means it's probably useful. We just don't know why.
Right.
Well, the reason that junk melanin is likely in the brain is that it's providing extra power when necessary. And the way your body makes melanin is by cross-linking polyphenols, these colored compounds in food. Coffee is full of something called melanoids, which are melanin precursors. So one of the things that's part of the Headstrong set of things to make your brain work better is how can you increase melanin inside your brain and your eyes and on your skin to the extent your skin can do it. And the way you do that is you eat lots of polyphenols, and this is going to sound totally crazy. You actually go outside without a shirt on.
Wow.
Shocking.
Are you
right?
sure?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds dangerous, but people might have done it in our long history. And you don't go outside for 10 hours. There's actually good evidence that you don't want to overdo it. But if you have a naturally darker complexion, right? Okay, you've got a darker complexion than I do. You need a little bit more sun than I do, right? Except I'm lying, because even though I'm pretty much, they would call it this butt white, it turns out genetically my vitamin D receptors are set up. So I really, according to the functional genomics guys, this company called the DNA Company, they went through my stuff and they said, Dave, you don't look it, but you should be living on a Pacific island. You have the vitamin D receptors of someone with much darker skin. So you got to really watch your consumption of vitamin D. You need to take more of it because you break it down fast and you don't convert that well in sunlight. So like, damned if I do, damned if I don't. You can go down the DNA path, and I talk about DNA analysis and what you might want to do or not do in Superhuman. But bottom line here is, if you can do something to increase melanin in your brain and in your eyes, you're probably going to have better eyes. And let's talk eyesight for a minute. I did some really advanced testing of my eyes to say, all right, what's going on? Because, man, macular degeneration is one of those things you don't want to get when you're old. Oh, I'm old and I'm happy and I have lots of energy and I can't read anymore because my eyes don't work. My dad has it, by the way. So there's stuff you can do with microcurrents and acupuncture points and vitamins and all. And I formulated an eye supplement that I've been taking for years. And I started True Dark. I'm wearing these glasses here from this company that specifically blocks certain damaging blue light. And when I went to the eye doctor, she said, this is crazy. You're 46 years old. You're 20/15 in both eyes. And you can read the very finest print that like a 16-year-old can read without glasses. And, quote, you are exhibiting none of the stiffening of your eyes that we expect to see in someone your age. Something's working.
Yeah, that's so cool. So one of the last things I want to ask you about, again, so many things I want to ask you, is just really in the same vein, because we want to avoid what you call junk light. But then there is some light that we are not getting enough of that are tied to longevity. So let's talk a little bit about that.
It's really interesting when you say, oh, light's good or light's bad. Well, which light? It's the same as fat or protein. Which protein? Yeah. Was this the bad stuff or the good stuff? And then what's the dose? And even what's the timing? We were wired to wake up when the sun comes up. When the sun comes up, it's not very hot. There isn't a lot of infrared light, but there's lots of red light because that's sunrise, the pink and orange, that kind of color. And then as the day progresses, it sends a signal. 5% of the cells in our eyes are called melanopsin sensing cells. They receive light, but you don't ever see that light. It doesn't go into your visual cortex. It goes around your visual cortex into the timing system that tells your brain what time of day it is, so it knows whether you should be hunting for something or going to sleep, whether you should be making melatonin or you should be making testosterone or whatever else. It really messes with your entire system to get that wrong. And as the day progresses, the angle of the light coming down and the entire spectrum from ultraviolet at the very high end all the way down to infrared, middle of the day. It turns out getting infrared and red light before ultraviolet primes the skin to protect itself. And if we do what we do today, which is you go into an office, which has blue lights, these LED lights are very rich in blue spectrum. They have no infrared because that's energy efficient. The body's like, I'm getting hit with the most stressful light source and none of the healing and supportive and priming light sources. So the answer for that is you wake up and go outside with your glasses off, your contacts out, and take your shirt off, or at least have your sleeves rolled up for 20 minutes. And this is how you tell your body that it's morning. And if you do that, you will sleep like a baby at night. And if you, at nighttime, do what I do at home. I installed red outdoor lights instead of white ones, so I don't attract bugs to the house. I don't interfere with the owls and eagles and other birds that live there. But I can go outside and see the stars because I don't blind myself. And indoors, I have dimmer switches. And when I travel, I wear the True Dark sleep glasses. This is a patented set of frequencies so that I can get usually a couple hours of deep sleep, even if I'm in a hotel and I landed at midnight and I was at over-illuminated airports and places like that. It's all about light. And if you want thick, healthy skin, red light and infrared light are shown in lots of studies, and even amber light, which is a new thing that True Dark is doing. They have something called True Light with amber in it. And yes, I'm promoting my own company in case anyone was just wondering. What happens with that stuff, though, is the studies are out there, and they show this is what this color of yellow does to the skin. This is what this color of red does to the skin. This is what infrared does. So I regularly expose myself to that. I travel with those things sometimes and have them at home, and we use them at Upgrade Labs at the Beverly Hilton here and in Santa Monica, where you can lay on giant beds. And a study showed from one of the vendors that we work with, when you use their very high intensity red light, they had a large number of people go through with dermatologists looking at their skin. And they went for 40-minute sessions, 10 sessions. So they laid on looks like a tanning bed, but it's red lights. And 100% of people had a reduction of fine lines in their skin. So their skin all got healthier. But here's the kicker. Saying maybe this is fake or whatever. So they waited 3 months with no additional treatments, and they had the dermatologist look at the people again. And they found that somewhere around 8% of them they just maintained the wrinkle reduction. But the other, and it's around 8%, I'm a little off, but it's in that range. The other 90 or 92% of people, they had a further reduction in wrinkles. In other words, the light exposure turned on healing and collagen thickening that stayed on for 3 months after they were exposed to the light. That's how important light is for the thickness and quality of your skin. And I just got to say, if you're listening to this and you have brown skin, it's even more important. And most people I know who have darker colored skin, huge advantage. You don't age as much. Like literally, like it's very hard to tell your age. So you already have an advantage from all the melanin in the skin, but it means that the light exposure for your skin is even more important for hormonal regulation, right? So it's a double-edged sword there. And I look where I am, like my skin is wired to look old sooner because it's paler, right? And then I've got to make sure I get the right amount of sun, but not too much sun. So it's very individualized. And I'll just tell you, red, infrared, and amber, they do magic things to your skin.
Wow. So awesome, man. So it's true. Black don't crack. That's amazing.
That's what all my friends tell me.
Dave, this has been so awesome. And you know what's so powerful is as I was reading through your story, I saw so many different things that really just spoke to myself, you know, like on a deeper level, because I know what it takes to experiment. I know what it takes to, you know, be a pioneer and to push the boundaries. And you've done that like few people ever have.
Thank you.
And it's just a really, really powerful thing to see, man. So thank you for putting in that work.
I appreciate you seeing it.
Now, can people eat animal foods? Certainly. You're designed to be able to digest both plant and animal foods. The problem today is the animal foods that are available to us may not be the same animal foods that might have been available to our ancient ancestors, and the quantity that we're being exposed to may be a problem. In other words, it's just like you can eat too much of anything, too much water, I guess they call it drowning. I mean, anything can be done to excess. But some foods, like animal foods, lend themselves to overeating easier than, say, plant foods with their high fiber content that provide normal satiety. So what we advocate for our patients before fasting, after fasting, is a whole food diet. So whole plant foods, so fruits, vegetables, non-glutinous grains, beans, nuts, and seeds, but not processed, juiced, blended, taken down into a more concentrated form, but in a whole form. And if you do that, the tendency to overeat is dramatically reduced. So we tend to not have as much problem with obesity, dietary excess, blood sugar dyscrasias, etc. And the same principle would be true to animal foods. If you ate whole animal foods without salt, oil, and sugar and all the processing, you'd have much less tendency to overeat, and you'd have much less consequences from dietary excess. My viewpoint, the less the better.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is a lot of these things are coming together in one source. Like upwards of 80% of the salt people are consuming is from processed foods. So just by pulling out that piece, you automatically skyrocket your potential and your benefits. And I want to circle back because this point is so, in our paradigm, it can seem so counterintuitive, and there's some nuance here. But I want to talk about, you mentioned that 5 to 40 days of fasting, for example. So I want you to answer two questions. So number one, what's the longest fast that's been recorded? And number two, if we're talking a couple of weeks, if we're talking 40 days, are we not getting into a place of starvation? What's the difference between fasting and starvation?
So that's a very, very important question. And fasting is when you have labile reserves that you still have that you can mobilize. Starvation is the moment you've depleted your labile reserves and you begin to break down vital tissues. Now, fasting results in improved health. Starvation results in death. So we don't do starvation at True North Health Center because obviously it would damage our outcome data tremendously. We're really proud of our safety data. We've had 20,000 people walk in and 20,000 people walk out, and we're trying to keep it that way. And the way you do that is avoiding starvation. And the way we do that is we establish baselines, monitor people twice a day. Lots of signs and symptoms that we can monitor to measure that, from electrolyte levels to even looking at basic things like BMI. So the average 70-kilogram male, though, just a healthy male, has enough reserves in their body to fast about 70 days. So we're not even getting close to starvation in our patient population. Now, a very, very thin person wouldn't necessarily be able to fast 40 days. They may not have the reserves to be able to safely do that. Also, I might mention that weight loss in fasting is very rapid at first and in overweight patients, but in thinner people, weight loss is much slower. The body's conservation mechanisms kick in. And so weight loss can be as little as 2 pounds a week, deep into the fast. So it's different than early in fasting where people are diuresing and losing fluid and all that. Now, one thing I want to point out, though, is we are the first place I know that has done this, but we have a DEXA scanner with the new software that does whole body composition. And so we've actually been able to go through and do a study where we are able to show exactly what happens to the fat, the protein, and specifically visceral fat during water-only fasting. And what we found is that not only is fat preferentially mobilized during fasting and protein conserved if you're resting, but that visceral fat is preferentially mobilized. So you might lose 20%, a person might lose 20% of their adipose tissue, but they may lose 50% of their visceral fat and only a small percentage of their lean tissue. And then after fasting, so what happens in fasting is you lose a bunch of weight. After fasting, you regain weight. But the way you regain after fasting is water, fiber, glycogen, and protein, not fat. The fat keeps going down. And so what happens is you've lost a bunch of fat, you keep losing fat, but you regain your muscle, your fluid, your fiber, and your glycogen. And it used to be they thought, well, you lose weight, you gain it back, not a good thing. Now we know if rest is introduced in fasting, it minimizes protein mobilization and minimizes gluconeogenesis. If you're too active when you're fasting, what you end up doing is burning protein. And that's why we insist on a restful state. Now, we let them stretch and do yoga and avoid the pathology of bed rest, but that's not a time to be trying to maximize weight loss. You're trying to maximize fat loss. And so the mistake a lot of people do on their own when they're trying to do weight loss regimes is they're doing vigorous exercise in conjunction with fasting. And yeah, they're losing weight, but they're also depleting protein stores unnecessarily. And so that's a really important issue. And we have a paper coming out people that are interested in that, we have a fasting website called fasting.org, which is a fasting compendium website where it brings the world's literature on fasting together. And they can go on there, and as the papers are published, we release it onto that site. And they'll be able to see this, but it's really exciting because we've got really exciting, and we've also got follow-up data now, because we've taken these people before, during, and after fasting, and then during refeeding, but then we've flown them back at 6 weeks, and they're able to show not only did they lose fat and continue to lose fat, but they can sustain that in a free living environment. And that's been a big criticism. Well, yeah, they can do it at True North Health Center where everything is done for them, but what happens when they go back to the real world? And we're able to show that people are able to sustain this, particularly appropriately motivated people. And the best motivation for people, I find, is pain, debility, and fear of death. So people that are sick are usually willing to do dangerous and radical things like eat well and exercise and go to bed on time. And also really health conscious people that are, being smart about it, trying to do health promotion, they also do really well. For the people that are looking for magic, this isn't so good. If they want to just keep indulging in short-term pleasure-seeking, self-indulgent behavior, they don't want to exercise, they don't want to get enough rest, this isn't for them. This is for highly motivated people that really, above all else, want to avoid the last 20 years of debility that will face most people because they don't live healthily during their younger years.
All right, there's a lot there. So much good stuff. Listen, one of the big takeaways that I got, which is incredibly surprising, I love that you actually looked at this piece and studied it. Where is the fat being mobilized from that the body is breaking down? So it's predominantly coming from our visceral fat, which is well noted to be our most dangerous type of fat associated with cardiovascular disease, diabetes, the list goes on and on, Alzheimer's, but also, so in a lesser ratio of the subcutaneous fat, and also there's a muscle sparing capacity. But the key here is while you're doing the protocol, you're not exercising your face off.
Right. That's unfortunately not where you can exercise. And so when you think about weight loss, you have a couple pounds of glycogen in your muscle. So you've lost 2 pounds of glycogen, and that will come back as you start refeeding. And you have fiber in your intestinal tract. That's going to go way down. Obviously, fasting, you're not going to have active bowel movements once the material that's in the colon is cleared. That you're going to start getting to have normal fiber back in them. You're going to be a little bit dehydrated because there's a physiological dehydration that occurs with fasting as part of the conservation mechanism. So you're going to get your fluid levels back, as you come off the fast. So there's several pounds of weight gain. That has nothing to do with fat. The fat on a whole plant food diet after fasting continues to go down. And that's what's really exciting. Even as the weight goes up, the percentage of body from fat and visceral fat continues to drop. And that continues as long as you keep eating a health-promoting diet. And then, of course, once you add exercise, then you pump back up the labile protein that you may have lost during fasting. You don't lose any muscle cells, but you lose a little bit of the juice out of the muscle, and that comes back after fasting. It takes people about the length of fast refeeding to get back to where they were before fasting. That's very important for athletes that are utilizing fasting, because they have to remember they have to have a recovery period, or it will deplete, they will diminish their performance levels. So they have to have adequate recovery after fasting in order to be able to compete effectively.
This is great. My big mission is providing a multifaceted viewpoint of wellness and options for folks who oftentimes, same people coming into my office were people who were told, this is incurable. This is something you're gonna have to live with for the rest of your life. You'll never walk again. You've got a certain amount of time to live, and all these different stories. And I want people to know that there's a variety of different voices, and the people that I bring forward for everybody are getting results for their patients, and they're not treating symptoms. They're removing the underlying cause of the disease, and there's many different paths to the goal, but this one can be incredibly powerful. Specifically, let me ask you about this. You mentioned colitis. And this is one of those conditions where for some folks, they have a chronic disease, but it's not as noticeable. It's not as like just a visceral experience. Even if somebody has high blood pressure, for example, they might not even know it. But when you have colitis, it's a constant issue. It can be just something that just keeps on interrupting your life. Same thing with Crohn's. Can you just talk a little bit about any success you've seen with that?
Yeah, if you have Crohn's or colitis, you may have, as much as 20 bloody bowel movements a day. It can be a really debilitating condition. It limits people where they can go, what they can do, constant pain, debility, anemia, surgery, and premature death. And what's fascinating to me is that the diet is often not emphasized by conventional gastroenterologists. Some of them are antagonistic that diet may have anything to do with it. I mean, why would you think that what you put in your mouth might have something to do with what comes out the other end? I mean, how ridiculous. And the fact is, there are some food factors that are so profound that many of my patients have already figured it out just by trial and error before we even talk to them. One is dairy products. Dairy products are like gasoline on the fire of inflammation for many colitis patients. Those proteins are just absolutely antagonistic, and people can turn on and off their colitis sometimes just how much dairy proteins they're putting in their diet. Sometimes just stopping dairy is enough to actually bring the condition under better control. Another is glutinous grains, particularly wheat, rye, barley. These food factors, for people that are sensitive to those, it can be devastating. Now, we know in 1% of the population that have celiac disease, everybody accepts that. But they have trouble understanding that just because your immune system isn't attacking you in the way that it does with celiac doesn't mean it can't be contributing to factors downstream in the colon or with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. The gene, the HLA-DQ gene associated with Hashimoto's thyroiditis is the same gene associated with gluten sensitivity. So if the colon isn't being attacked by the immune system, it may be the thyroid that's being attacked. Lots of different mechanisms by which the body can be compromised by these factors. Sugar itself can be often antagonistic for colitis patients, as is alcohol. Alcohol is nasty, and most colitis patients recognize, if they hold off on the drinking, then they have better control in the bowel. If they do fasting, it's really profound because the gut will heal itself, and then with a carefully controlled diet, you can oftentimes get enough control that the need for medication is eliminated.
So I want to reemphasize this, especially when we're talking about going from, the SAD diet, the standard American diet, or even a healthful diet and still dealing with chronic issues. I want to implore folks to, reach out to your center and to get more information, because we're talking about medically supervised water fasting. And I would love if you could, this is a really important part of this, if you could just give a brief summation of what is the proper way people should be fasting? Like, do you just jump right into it? And also, what do you do after the fast is over? Do you just jump right back to eating food?
Yeah, most important part of fasting is appropriate refeeding. It takes about half the length of a fast to carefully realiment. And in a longer fast, that's very important. It can be very serious, damaging, or even deadly. There's processes called refeeding syndrome where a person has a very long fast and were to go on to inappropriate refeeding, they can get into really serious trouble. So it's very important if you're going to do fasting. Number one, history exam and lab. Make sure you're a good candidate for fasting. Number two, proper supervision during fasting and appropriate rest, and then careful realimentation. So we usually, for example, will start with fresh fruit or vegetable juices, go to whole fruits and vegetables, steamed and starchy vegetables, and there's a progressive pattern. There's a day per week of fasting for each of these things that we do, so that it takes about half, like a 40-day fast takes about 20 days to fully realiment. A 10-day fast takes about 5 days to recover in a controlled setting. So careful refeeding, probably the most important part of fasting. Appropriate patient selection, the most important part of not screwing people up. And remember that people cannot do water fasting on most medications safely, that there's a profound change in the body that occurs in fasting that would make even medications that they're tolerating feeding not safe fasting, and also that inappropriate withdrawal of medications can be a serious problem. You don't just stop steroids, for example, overnight. You can get serious problems. So it's important to work with a doctor that is familiar with this process, particularly as we get into people that are on medications, have health issues, or doing longer fasting. And one of the things we offer for free to your listeners is if they're interested in finding out if any of this might be relevant to them, they can go on our website, complete the registration forms, and we offer a no-cost phone conversation with me to talk about, is this relevant? We can refer them to a doctor that perhaps is close to them that might be familiar with this type of work. We have a group of doctors that we've trained over the years that are out there in practice, or they can come to the True North, if it's appropriate, to come to the True North Health Center or one of the other centers that specialize in fasting supervision around the country. We can help put them in contact with those resources. We also have doctors around the country that offer phone coaching that are through Zoom and through phones, where they can talk to a doctor that's not an idiot. They'll help them engage about, yes, it's possible to get well, these are things they might want to do, or work with their local family physician in helping them through one of these processes. So we do offer some services to help people implement this, because we recognize not everybody has a doctor that's versed with nutrition or fasting or whatever, and some of their physicians are actually antagonistic. They don't think that you should eat a health promoting diet. That's not not appropriate. You know, you need, everybody's got to have milk or whatever it is that they believe. And you know, the fact they're wrong doesn't make it any easier on the patient.
Can you share that website for everybody that's listening?
Yeah, our website is truenorthhealth.com.
Okay, perfect.
truenorthhealth.com. Click on the registration forms. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, I love that you said this is something that's occurring more and more, thankfully. You know, again, I've been in this field for 20 years, but now it's starting to come up as like, don't just get a second opinion. Get a second opinion from somebody who has the same goal as you. Get an opinion from somebody who actually knows it's possible to not need lisinopril or metformin or Celebrex or whatever it is that you're using to treat the symptom that's caused by your lifestyle-related behavior. So I love that so much. Now,
there's one other thing I just would mention. If people really want to get into the weeds with this, we have a book. It's called The Pleasure Trap. And it's readily available from Amazon and all the rest of it. And The Pleasure Trap is a bit of a disturbing book because it tells people what they need to know, not what they want to hear. So it's not going to give you foo-foo, blow smoke up your dress kind of a book. But if you're really serious about understanding it, it goes through and does a good job of explaining the rationale. It talks a lot about fasting and how fasting can be used to help escape the pleasure trap, and about the diet and lifestyle recommendations that we make. So there are resources available.
Perfect. So, okay, we answered the tail end of the question. Now, what about the beginning? What is the proper way people should be fasting?
So everybody should be fasting, in my opinion, 12 to 16 hours every day. Every day. You need to not eat the 3 or 4 hours before you go to sleep at night. Don't be eating right before you go to bed, because that food not only gets stored as fat, but it also tends to disrupt the sleep quality. People believe that if you do some exercise before you eat breakfast in the morning, it actually preferentially mobilizes fat reserves. That may be true. And so you have this period of fasting each and every day, 12 to 16 hours. And then we believe that occasionally appropriately screened patients may benefit from a longer period of fasting, ranging from 5 to 40 days. We recommend that be done in conjunction with their physicians and with the help of doctors that are familiar with fasting so they don't muck it up. Or come to a place like True North Health where we'll be happy to do everything for you. We'll supervise you, we'll get you through the process, we can do it affordably.
Perfect, I love that. So let's go back. You kept saying this about exercise and fasting have so many similarities, and you mentioned some of the different things, you know, autophagy, but one of those things that jumped out, BDNF, for example.
Right. You know, BDNF is really exciting, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. They did stuff with rats where they put rats in, genetically bred rats, so they're the same. And they put them in cages, they treat everything the same, except they give one rat a wheel where it can exercise. And they will exercise. And they noticed that the rats that exercised didn't get Alzheimer's disease, dementia, you know, rat dementia, which they test by various, you know, maze tricks and stuff. So they didn't get the brain deterioration. They said, why is it the rats that exercise don't get dementia, and the rats that can't exercise because they're in this stupid little cage develop dementia? What is it? What's different? And they found that one difference was something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which protects nerve cells from the damage of free radicals. And we believe that in humans and rats, people that have high BDNF levels have lower likelihood of getting dementia. Maybe one of the reasons why some people get dementia and some people don't. Well, exercise increases BDNF, and so does fasting. Fasting has a profound effect on BDNF, as does exercise. So we want to use fasting to increase BDNF levels, and whether it's 16 hours every day, or whether it's a week, or 2 or 3 or 4 once a year, whatever it's going to be, we believe that the accumulation of those practices may actually help us avoid premature death and disability, increase healthy life expectancy, not just life expectancy, how long you live, but can you avoid the 10 to 20 years of debility that many people experience at the end of their life? Can you live fully functional where you go to sleep one night and don't wake up, a natural death? Or are you going to spend the last 10 years of your life unable to talk or move, lying in some nursing home bed waiting for people to come and change your diaper? We believe the difference may largely be by taking control of what you put in your mouth. So our recommendations are health results from healthful living. Healthful living involves diet, sleep, and exercise, and periodic fasting, whether it's 12 to 16 hours a day or possibly longer periods of time occasionally. And that we advocate a whole plant food SOS-free diet as what we think is the diet most likely to give you the best chance of not getting debility later in life, slow the aging process, and avoid the refined foods of any kind.
Perfect. I think a lot of people would love to know this. And for example, again, my mother-in-law, every year she does a structured fast herself, even though she's incredibly healthy. What do you do? How often do you fast?
So I fast every year. I fast for a week. If I have no symptoms, then I'm going to break it. Now, I personally don't like fasting because you cannot play basketball. You have to rest. I find it very disruptive to my routine, which may be part of the benefit. So, I do that every year. And I believe that the people that get the most benefit of fasting are those healthy people doing it preventatively. I know my mother, when she was 92 years old, she realized she had outlived all of her friends. All 52 of her friends that she'd known over the years were all dead. And now many of them used to make fun of her because of her crazy diet and all that kind of stuff. But nonetheless, she said she felt very alone because at 92, it's hard to make friends with much younger people. And the people in anywhere around her age group were often debilitated and didn't want to do the things that she wanted to do. And she said, Alan, you need to warn your patients. If they're going to do this diet, make younger friends. So I warn people, start now, make younger, healthier friends so that later you'll still have people you can socialize with.
Oh my goodness, that's words of wisdom right there. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So, I think that, I love that you just said that as something that is supportive of one who's already healthy, already taking on, because I think that a lot of this has been focused on, which it rightfully should be, on the healing of chronic diseases, which is a big part of our population. Right here in the United States, we've got right now at this very time, 242 million adults are overweight or obese. We've got about 50 to 60% of our population has some degree of heart disease. We've got 115 to 130 million folks diabetic, pre-diabetic. We've got a lot of issues that we can solve, but we can also get better. And that's what's so exciting about conversations like this, is like, what are the things that we can add into our superhero utility belt to just make us even better?
I think one of the keys is recognize the pleasure trap, the hidden force that undermines health and happiness. If you really get the message of the pleasure trap, then you are very empowered because you can take responsibility to control your diet, your sleep, your exercise, and fasting, and avoid the diseases rather than have to try to treat them later.
Yeah, I love that. Now, this is something that I touched on a little bit earlier, but it's weird that we're going to put this towards the end of the conversation, but I would love to know, because there's so many benefits here noted. Obviously, we've got so many different peer-reviewed studies on it. You're doing research, you're seeing the success with your patients, but has this been around a long time in medicine? Can you share a little bit of the history of fasting?
Well, fasting, Moses, David, Elijah, Jesus fasted for 40 days, as long as 40 days. This use of fasting has been back to Hippocrates. This is not anything we've invented. All we're doing is taking this ancient practice and trying to research it so we can better explain why it works. They've already known it works. It's just a question of what are the mechanisms. And so that's what we're really interested in doing right now with our research, is trying to figure out non-invasive biomarkers so we can better tell who should fast, how long should they fast, when are they done fasting, and what dietary patterns work the best at maintaining health, not just over the short term, but in the long term. And our particular goal is helping people increase healthy life expectancy so they live until they die and not end up becoming debilitated and having to rely on their kids to kind of care for them, but rather remain high degree of functionality right till they reach their genetic potential.
So Hippocrates, the quote father of modern medicine, was employing fasting as a tool.
And way before that, as far back as you can go, you're going to find references to the use of fasting.
Yep, definitely. So I've got a couple final questions for you. And one of them, you mentioned earlier, you said to make sure that you're a good candidate, right? And I would imagine, again, the majority of folks are a good candidate for employing some smart fasting in their life in one form or another. So who would not necessarily be a good candidate? And can we get those folks who aren't in that category to being a good candidate somehow?
Yeah, so the people that have depletion deficiency syndrome, they've got cachexia, they're anorexia nervosa patients, people that have depletion issues, people that are in the end stages of metastatic disease, people that have severe kidney disease, because you need a certain amount of kidney function in order to be able to adapt to the fast, For example, if creatinine levels are over 2.0, we're not normally using water-only fasting. We'll do a modified program just because it would put too much load on those debilitated kidneys. People that are on anticoagulant medications would have to be stabilized off medication first, because you can't just fast on these medications because they get potentiated and create a problem. And if you just withdraw them, then you're at potential risk of stroke or having other problems. So it's really important that medications be appropriately managed, withdrawn, and be done appropriately in order to ensure that this is effective. People that have dysrhythmia issues that require anticoagulant therapy, because the anticoagulant therapy contraindicates fasting, would have to be managed with an alternative approach. But I might mention that some of the intermittent fasting approaches where they're using limited calorie intake can be done in conjunction with medication, so long as the physician is familiar with how to modify the drugs. So, those are some of the more common issues. Probably the biggest contraindication of fasting is fear. Fear is a very expensive emotion, so it's important people be educated to understand that this is an adaptive mechanism that the body had to have in order for our species to survive. Right now, though, people are so afraid of fasting. If they get on a plane to New York and they fly to California, they're pretty sure they'll die over Colorado if they don't eat the peanuts. They think the pretzels saved their life because, 5 hours would be, more than what their body could adapt to. Once they've seen that fasting works, once they've experienced it, they realize their body's ability to fast is a biological adaptation. All the humans that couldn't fast died in our ancestry. They had to be able to survive because spring would come late. And with this big bulbous neuronal net we have, our brain that's our biggest burner of glucose, if you didn't have the ability to change your brain from burning sugar to burning fat, you wouldn't be able to live any longer than the chimps can. And that's why you'll always find chimps hanging out in the tropics where there's a ready supply of fruit all year long, because their brain doesn't change to burning fat. It stays burning glucose. They can't fast like we can. Humans are really special because we had such a big brain. We had to have the ability to do this, and all the people that didn't have that ability are dead. Your ancestors, the ones that got enough to eat, didn't get eaten, lived long enough to reproduce, and passed on their genes. Your brain is the same genes as a human 100,000 years ago. The only thing that's really changed is our environment. We changed the environment with our innovation. And now we have access to highly processed fractionated foods. And that's why we have 2/3 of our population, as you said, being overweight or obese. Because they're exposed to these chemicals. We're addicts. We've become addicted to the pleasure trap cycle, and we've got to get out of it. Some people can get out on their own. Some people need help. Some people need to use fasting to escape the pleasure trap.
This has been incredibly enlightening, and thank you so much for sharing your brilliance. I got one final question for you, and it's just so apparent in having this conversation. What makes you so passionate about this? What's getting you up every day and working with patients and just inspiring you to do this work in the way that you're doing it?
Well, my wife says that the reason we made up the True North Health Center was so that I'd have a place to eat, and that the reason I'm doing this work is because I want to prove I'm right and everybody else is wrong. So she might be right. We've been married for 38 years, so
She's
whatever
right.
she says, I know the secret to a successful marriage. I know those 2 magic words. Yes, dear.
That's right. Legendary. Legendary. Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here to up-level your health today. Oftentimes when you have, an injury or an issue like this, we're told not to do anything. That's often the worst thing you can do because things will start to atrophy. If you don't use it, you lose it.